Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Here in the United States on the East Coast, it's pretty rainy and dreary, but I'm happy to say I'm here with Luke and we're going to have a good conversation, which would make the day much better for me.
Well, it's nice and
So,
bright here.
well, good. Is
Yeah,
it?
we're
Is it
getting a
sunny
nice
in the
sun.
UK?
Well,
You had
yeah,
a
it's
nice one? Yeah.
sun's out. Yeah, it's a sunset at the moment, so we're in golden hours. Everything's looking nice and
Oh,
pretty.
Oh, good. Well, then I'm glad you had a good day with the sun and all. And thank you, everyone who enjoyed us in the chat. Thank you for the moderators who came because I actually slept through all of the time. I would have been preparing to let the mods know what time this was. So thank you all for being here, for checking the notes. No, I don't think you need to send any bearded any challenges. Get in here, godless cover. It's going to be a serious conversation, but thank you. And thanks for being here, all of you. But I don't know about you, Luke, but I would just like to just jump right in. This is a continuation of our first conversation with about Amber Heard. And at that point, we had only heard the testimony of the lovely Dr. Shannon Curry, which was mind expanding for me. I learned a lot about the testing and about different personality disorders. And then talking to you with all the information that you had sent me to read, and I've been checking into it. I got a better kind of understanding of some of the ways that we can interpret the way Amber's actually been discussing things and talking. Like I don't know about you, but I can actually see a lot of it now.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in relation to like if the personality disorder is an accurate diagnosis, and it seems to me that like I don't know if you saw this as well, but throughout most of the articles I sent, borderline personality disorder is like a key risk indicator for interpartner violence. So yeah, so if that's accurate, then that explains a lot. But if it's not, then it might be just it could be that the plaintiffs trying to use that because they know that that's what the case is.
Yeah, I think that it speaks well for them because they're trying to say that a lot of what she says didn't happen. And of course, by bringing to light all of this personality disorders, and a lot of them have to do with exaggeration and just I don't want to use the term unrealistic, but I can't think of a better one. Unrealistic view of what's actually happening like around her. Like I know she knows right from wrong. We've discussed that before, right?
Yeah,
that she clearly definitely understands right from wrong, as both of the psychologists would agree. She knows right from wrong. She's got a good grasp on what's going on. But her need to exaggerate it or make it different or tell even a whole different story or make up a whole different story to enhance something else in her life is like, it's a strong pull with these disorders. It's almost like something she needs to do. I mean, from what I see, when she's challenged or put into a situation where, from what I see, and correct me, it's just from what I see, whenever she feels less than, whenever she feels someone's making her feel less than, the pushback is unbelievable. It's like a mountain. It's like a mountain coming at you,
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of is, prevalent in both forms for different reasons of the borderline personality disorder and the histrionic. That would be prevalent in both forms, but just like for different reasons. One is about abandonment and then the other one is about self-image. So if both are present, then you get this like kind of horrible mix where you get the someone who fears abandonment and will kind of lash out then, and also when their self-image is being potentially compromised as well, you might see it then as well. So
and that self-image, that could be just like just even just like you said, the abandonment part, or if she feels like her career is less than his, or someone's looking at her as not as great as she thinks she's doing, or not as an equal, or in any way, or even just not doing what she perceives would be fulfilling her need to do something, as we saw a lot in the audios, right? In even being pushing so hard for the way one must conduct themselves during an argument. like as if there was only one way to do it. Like
Yeah.
her way was the only way. He was like, I heard that in a lot of the audio. He was not allowed to do an argument his way. He got no credit for wanting to walk away or needing time to cool out, or even in how he caged his tone and his voice.
Yeah.
She had specific idea about how that should happen. It seemed. To I don't know. It's just mind blowing. I don't know about you, but like I'm feeling a little like I don't know what to think anymore. It's like, in regards to Amber Heard, and I'd like to talk about that too. Like how did you walk? Let's go to the very last moment of the testimony when you've heard the last thing you were going to hear before we broke. Okay, like as far as how did you feel? Because
yeah, I mean, I think before Amber took the stand, it was quite easy to be anti-Amber. And I think a lot of people are probably still anti-Amber, but I think just because of the work I do and the kind of role I have, I take all the. I mean, I'm sure everyone takes this stuff seriously, but I take it kind of really seriously, and it's hard not to just feel uncomfortable hearing someone talk about abuse to the severity that Amber's talking about it, and not feel compelled to believe it. And I think part of that comes from the Me Too movement, where it was very much kind of like we believe victims, and I think that's absolutely right. We should believe anyone that initially that claims that they've been abused. I don't see why that would be any different. And so when we're faced with that kind of testimony, we end up feeling. I think it's got to be some form of like cognitive dissonance. There's this one side where we have all this evidence and we're not convinced by it, and then this other side where we're hearing it and it sounds horrible and it sounds like something we should want to care someone for, and then we've got to try and match those things together. We've got to pick one side, and that tends to result in a sense of discomfort within yourself,
right?
And it tends to result in, and it could result in aggressive behavior towards the person. So if you end up kind of going towards the this is the evidence side and this is a load of rubbish, you might actually become aggressive towards Amber because of that feeling. And
feeling like she's trying to hoodwink you or something.
Yeah, exactly. And potentially even irrationally angry, and then on the other side, because we're not personally involved, are we? So there could be that irrational anger, right? And then the other side of it is if you go towards Amber's side, you could become more aggressive towards people who are trying to just talk about the evidence and say, look, this is not clear. And anyone that kind of like steps over that boundary, you'll become aggressive towards them. So I think that's certainly happening in a lot of cases. And I think that it's difficult for many people to hear it, or whether they believe it or not believe it, because it's such a sensitive topic. And I think that I get that part. You have that right there, the sensitivity of it right there, because like I find myself, everyone would tell you I spoke loudly about being I was biased. I was definitely not on Amber Heard's side at all, and I'd have to say evidence wise I'm not, but I understand that feeling, because when I left the trial, personally myself, I was rocked. I was absolutely rocked at having listened to all of that. I almost was making myself feel guilty that I didn't believe somebody that was telling such a story. Do you know what I mean? Like I couldn't believe somebody would be up there for 2 days with that kind of stuff and tell all of that. And then just made myself like, how can you not have any feeling for a person who's saying these horrific things and everything? And I'd have to keep going back to the evidence. And it just, even then, because of, like you said, because of Me Too, where they say victims first, like believe the victim, okay, and then let's prove it. People's voices need to be heard. And I am one who will always go out there and say every voice needs to be heard all the time. It has to be heard. I wanted Johnny's voice to be heard. When Johnny finally got to tell his story, I was elated for him, that he finally got heard.
And I think that's where some of this, it's almost like a guilty, I don't want to say guilty because that sounds a little weird because we're not personally involved, right? So why would I feel guilty? But because I was so anti-Amber because of the evidence. I wasn't just anti-Amber because she's not easy to like. And believe me, I get it. She's not easy to like. She does a lot of stuff. People don't like her, basically. Then she does stuff that you really find morally or ethically apprehensible. And there you got like a whole big, I just don't want to even believe her kind of thing. And so that's why I started to just like look at it a little different. Only to gauge myself, to make sure I wasn't going, like you said, into that. It's so easy to just not like her and just pile everything that she's doing everything wrong. Like once you start to feel like she's manipulating you or she's not telling the truth, it's very easy to just kind of almost do like an avalanche of it's all wrong. And I wanted to just make sure I wasn't looking at it all that way, that it's all wrong. And I don't think I'm alone out there. I think some of you actually feel that. Some of you that have actually been victims of any kind of violence or any kind of abuse, whether it be verbal or physical. I hear you. Her making a mock, if this is not true and she's making a mockery of it, and I use the word if cagedly, believe me, I've seen the evidence. I don't really think it's true because I have not seen anything to indicate or support her story, including the testimonies of others who were there and around them all the time. So I do tend to not believe that it's true. I would say, if I had to say if I believed it or not, I'd have to say I don't actually believe
and I'm in the same boat there as well.
And it kind of gets to where you get that feeling of she's making a mockery of the real issue. That's even worse for me. Like then you go to the other part, and like you said, you can get really angry, and that's what I want to just let people know. I think we're all feeling kind of normally about this. It is a very confusing and hot topic, a very sensitive topic, and I just want everyone to take care for themselves. Like, your triggers, what's going to send you. Just remember, like, we don't have to deal with Amber Heard personally ourselves. Thank goodness. Yes, it's a terrible thing what she's doing, but we need to we all need to personally take care of ourselves. It's like, like we can't let her do what she's doing, what she's trying to do, like out there. And just manipulate everything. Take a little control ourselves back,
And I guess just to play devil's advocate, and I am playing devil's advocate here to an extent, that there's potentially a reason that we haven't seen any evidence so far, and that's because we've only had the plaintiff's testimonies, the witnesses from the plaintiff's side. There could be, and I'm pessimistic about whether there will be, but there could be, especially with the quality of their first witness and Amber's testimony so far. But there could be more evidence that's going to come out that could sway our opinions more. So we just got to be considerate to that. I think it's okay to lean towards a side, but if you've picked a side and you're going to stick with it no matter what, that's problematic, I think. But but yes, I agree. So far, the evidence is pretty conclusive in a lot of ways, and I am knowing some of the evidence that is probably going to come out due to previous cases and stuff. I'm pessimistic that they're going to bring anything that's going to be really kind of like strong. So, but it's just good to maintain an open mind, even though you're strongly swayed in one way or another at the moment.
Right. And I think it does, it speaks to people that have lived with those that have alcohol and abuse problems, those have had been through traumatic relationships, toxic relationships and stuff. So everyone's coming at it a little personally, and I just want to remind everyone, at least, and I have to remind myself, and I'm doing it today with this stream, that it's a legal case. Okay. And the only ones who get to actually pick a side before seeing all the evidence is the plaintiff and the defendant and their attorneys, because not the judge, the jury, or any of us watching should really do that until we really get it all. As much as I've seen, I'm definitely leaning towards Johnny Depp's side because of the types of evidence that have been, coming out over the last 2 years and the prior events. that happened before the trial. But about this, it's a defamation trial. It's not an abuse trial. And, abuse is on trial here because she mentioned abuse in the op-ed. Because she inferred it, and that's what the issue of defamation was. So that's why it's such a hot topic with this. It's very salacious. It makes it one of the biggest cases probably going to be of 2022 as far as coverage, and it's at least. I can't imagine it, even though I do legal updates and true crime. I can't imagine there'll be a bigger case than this for me for the rest of the year for 2022. I can't even wrap my mind to think that anything would be. Is this unbecoming? I mean, 9 hours a day, 4 days a week. Now we're going to be going Fridays, or at least one Friday. I know we're going Friday the 27th. I'm not sure if we're going the other one before, but can you imagine? I mean, that's a lot of time. It's a lot of time on one thing. And just to keep a little bit of an open mind, because, critical thinking, taking everything in, even for ourselves, just so that when we come to the conclusion, we have no conflict and we have no going back and forth, which will take up even more space in our real lives, But let's talk about Dr. Hughes. Like you mentioned there first, Whitney. So we did get to talk quite a bit about Dr. Curry in the last chat that we had. That was what were your opinion? Let's just talk about Dr. Hughes. I'll let you start. Yeah.
Well, I don't think Dr. Hughes' testimony will take up as much as Dr. Curry's did, because my views are pretty limited. Because I don't think she actually provided much in the way of new information. All she really did was say it's not personality disorder, it's PTSD. I think that her presentation was awful, and I think she overstepped professional boundaries considerably. And when I say that, what I mean is that Dr. Curry was very careful in her testimony not to draw a conclusion about what actually happened. She specified, I'm not a detective, I'm not a police officer, it's not my job to say if there is abuse or if there isn't abuse. Yet in the opening of the cross, one of the first questions to Dr. Hughes was, you used male and female pronoun. You used female pronouns as victims and male pronouns as perpetrators in your direct testimony, and she justified that by saying that she had decided that Johnny was the perpetrator of abuse and Amber was the victim of abuse in this case. And then she later testified that she doesn't have an opinion on whether abuse actually occurred in the in the thing, because she can't have a legal opinion on that. She can't have a professional opinion on that because she's not a detective. Yet throughout her testimony, she was talking about situations as if they are facts, and she was excuse me, she was saying she listed off all of the abusive acts that had happened throughout the relationship that were all alleged by Amber, either in her discussions with Dr. Hughes or in notes with therapeutic psychologists from before. And it just was so unprofessional, because she shouldn't have been making those claims. That really is just a real kind of like overstep there, and then to testify that she didn't have an opinion, it was just awful, really awful.
Yeah, it does. Even as a layperson, I'm not a psychologist and don't even study in school psychology that much. Well, I got an interest in it because of how people act, and things, and developed it based probably because I like the legal aspect of things and crime stories. But it did seem quite biased. It seemed almost like she was taking us all the way back to Me Too when this all started. As for the climate that was around when the op-ed came out, it was very pro victim. And it seems like most of her expertise comes from working in that environment, that she was clearly a Me Too therapist. She was clearly on the legal teams and on the ACLU. I wouldn't be surprised if the ACLU are the ones that put Amber and this Dr. Hughes in touch with each other. I've looked at other cases that she's testified in, because that's me. I'm going to look, and people were actually quite actively tossing me lots of Dr. Hughes's prior testimony in other cases. And she does have a tendency to be biased and use coached language that says that the woman is the victim and the man is 99% of the time the abuser.
Yeah, and that's not untrue. Like,
Yeah.
sorry, 1 second.
Statistically, I get that, but
Yeah,
far as evidence-wise, when you're coming in as an expert, I think you have to be careful with the language, though, don't you?
Well, so it's okay in research psychology to make these generalizations, right? Because you're talking about so for instance, like if you're talking about symptoms of a disorder, we use generalizations in order to successfully diagnose somebody. So somebody is hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there. Then we know we have all these other people who have had these symptoms before, and they've been diagnosed with schizophrenia. So that's how we do our diagnostic criteria, essentially. Now, the problem with doing this in a courtroom is that you're applying these generalizations to a single case and saying it's not likely that Amber is the perpetrator, because most of the time the woman is not the perpetrator. Now, that doesn't work in a court case, because I watched YouTube. I've forgotten what YouTube video it was, but I watched a YouTube video of a psychologist talking about this, and they said, imagine in a murder trial where you have 0.6% of deaths are murders, and then you use that as a statistic to say, well, it's unlikely that this situation was a murder because it's statistically unlikely that somebody dies from being murdered. It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So, in regards to the statistics, would you agree that whenever they put those statistics out, that most of the time, at least in the surveys, the things that I'm reading, and you have actually linked me to psychology, to like a lot of different psychological papers and things like that, they have lines in there that say clearly the numbers cannot be counted as 100% accurate, because here's the thing: men don't come forward.
Yeah.
Men don't come. Men aren't getting counted. How can you have a statistic that said men are 98% of the time the abuser when men aren't coming forward to report their own abuse?
Precisely.
Okay.
And not only that. Sorry.
Yeah. No. So she's not giving the whole picture, regardless of what she says, if you don't put the disclaimer in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And I mean, not only that, it's one of those situations where not only do men not know, not disclose when they are being abused, but I would say men don't know that they are being abused in the first place. So it's not about them being like kind of withholding the information. It's them not being aware that they can be abused, because society is very biased. Even within psychology, there's loads of papers from like even the 2000s that are saying that men cannot be the victim of interpartner violence, psychological papers, because of factors. And it's just like, and then it's crazy. It's really bad.
It is insane. And I have an actual unpopular opinion about that. And I get slammed on YouTube and by some very large women's organizations all the time for it. But you know what? When we say that it's like a double-edged sword, because yes, there was oppression against women for a long time. If you spoke out, you were called it's my channel. I'm going to use language that may offend people, but it's just how I am. You should be used to it by now. If you're here, you know me. But you cannot push against things like calling a woman a bitch when she's a bitch, but then the difference is if she has a strong opinion, she's a bitch. They're two different things, okay? But there's been such a pushback that you're not allowed to say anything negative to a woman who's being this way. Because then you are like a chauvinist, or you're misogynistic, or you're just keeping a woman down, or you're just pushing them down. You're not actually even in a position in 2022 to actually say what a woman is actually acting like. And I see it. And I feel for you, because if somebody's going out of their way to act like that, you don't even have the opportunity to say anything without getting judged 10 times over for it more harshly than what she's doing. So like normal nagging might be normal nagging. You know, there's men, women things, you know, women push in different ways against men than men do. Okay. And so there's nagging, there's harping, there's, you know, those kind of things that might be normal. But then there's the abusive, berating kind of talk that you might want to feel is wrong against you, that you're not allowed to say anything, because then you're just keeping her down from having her opinion. You're just keeping her from using her voice. Does any of this sound familiar?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
and it may sound strange coming from me, but I'm behind it, because, you know, brothers, friends, you know, partners that have been through it themselves. I see it and I recognize it. And I really want to stand on equality is equality. Okay. If I'm being a B, call me a B. Okay. And I should not be offended because I'm being a B and you're calling me a B. If I'm a B, that's it. Okay. You shouldn't have any more pressure on being allowed to say that or not. You know what I mean? And that's just how I look at it. You know, I'm not into extreme anything. Extreme misogynistic behavior of men, nor extreme feministic behavior of women. Okay, I'm not into toxic behaviors of any type. I just want some damn fairness and equality. You know, call it like you see it, you know. But I guess I'm just living in that like little rose-colored glass bear world of mine, you know, because I get a lot of crap for this from both sides, actually, from both sides, you know. But that's how I feel about it. That's why I think the statistics are skewed, because you don't have the freedom to come forward. When I say you, I mean men in general. Don't have a voice because of what happened before. But I think a lot of what progress is, yes, we have to deal with the past, just like any situation.
Yeah,
but
this actually is an interesting point, because this is a part of the trial, is Johnny making the claim that he has been abused himself by Amber, right? Now, Dr. Curry made a very good point, and something that's backed up by the literature, which is that that's not normal. It's not normal for a man that's been accused of domestic violence to come forward and say, actually, I'm the victim of this domestic violence. And there's the reasons for it, Clara, what you've just been saying about the potential, like the view on that individual's masculinity, the way that person might not be believed by people, and all of these things. So all of these reasons are why that wouldn't happen. Whereas, you know, it's much more frequent that if a woman is being the abuser, that they call it administrative abuse, right? That they'll threaten to go to the law and say, you know, I'm being abused by my male partner and stuff like that. That's much more frequent, because they will be believed, and there will be consequences for that man, but there won't be consequences for them. So for me, that's a tick in Johnny's case, because it doesn't make sense to me that he would have it's incredibly unlikely that he would have come forward as a victim if in this situation. It's just not really something that happens for male abusers.
Yeah, no, and I get that. That's why when there was testimony about the size, that it's don't believe that the abuse was done by Amber because of the size difference.
That was shocking.
That was shocking, because first of all, through everything that we heard in the trial, and the reason I keep referring to what we all have heard and saw as far as evidence in the trial, because I need it to be clear to everyone, and I think Luke would like to express this too, that Dr. Hughes has all this information and then some. She sees the stuff that hasn't even been presented yet. She's got all the notes. She's got all the evidence she's heard all of the testimony. She has all the same access we do. Okay. She just chooses to only go by Amber's words, which is her choice. She can, if she wants to believe it and then treat her that way, as far as treating her to get through it, believing that it's all true, fine. But to testify about it as if it's evidentially true is where I drew the line, because to say that it couldn't be true because of size, statistically, with the size and all, there's documentation that Amber threw things constantly, threw things in a fit constantly, that slapped out, that reached out in anger constantly. Okay. That was her go-to. She heard other therapists say so. She heard other professionals indicate so. Amber's own words.
She also testified that Amber only used reactionary violence, and then later on was asked about a certain situation and described it as not reactionary violence. And that, it's just like, if you're going to make a hyperbolic statement about someone's behavior, you need to really have the evidence to back up why you're making a hyperbolic statement. If it's all or nothing, and if there is even an element of behavior that isn't reactionary, then your the foundation of your argument is then just completely undermined.
No,
and this is a myth, actually. The size thing, it's just a myth.
It is.
What that links to, and Dr. Hughes really should know this, because she's very well, she's got a lot of qualifications, and she's quite high up in her career and stuff. That's about risk. So it is riskier for the victim of in an abuse situation to be smaller than the perpetrator. You're more likely to get more severe injuries. You're more likely to get even more fatal situations, and that's something we know, is that women are a lot more at risk of being killed in those relationships.
And that's a valid point right there that struck out to me, right? It is not perpetuation, it is risk, okay? She's not speaking in that point about it perpetually being more common that it would happen to her. She should be speaking on it being more risky if it did. Is that the difference? I mean, that's what I'm hearing. Like that's the difference. So it's not about the perpetrator. It's not about it, whether the perpetrator is smaller or larger. It's about the risk factor when those things happen. That's the angle that should be, or at least put a disclaimer in there, Dr. Hughes, because I think I could have took your testimony with more greater candor and more greater weight had you put in the appropriate context where it was necessary, like little things to say. That's not necessarily to say that these things can't happen. I just, based on my opinion of what I see and hear in the evidence, this is my opinion. That's what I want to hear, not as if it's a total fact. And that's what was offending me about her testimony, the way she was putting it all out there, that it could only be one way, period. And I don't really feel in psychology with experts that that's the appropriate, who am I to say so? I get it, but I found it offensive because it was,
There's also a remit there, isn't there? The remit of a psychologist is to analyze behavior and psychological, like cognitive factors within a situation. And she's no longer doing that. She's looking at photos and going, yeah, they look like bruises from abuse. I'm sorry, but like, she's not qualified to make that claim. She's not qualified to make a statement about whether a room looks like a crime scene, or I'm not saying she specifically said any of those things, but in her testimony, she was saying that she looked at the photos and stuff, and from all of that information, she gleaned that Johnny was the abuser. And that, to me, says that she saw the photos of Amber's, Amber being abused, and then took them as, oh yeah, that looks like bruising from a punch. But she can't make that statement. That's not her remit, is to analyze someone's face after it's been hurt in whatever way, and say, oh yeah, okay, that justifies my belief in that Johnny's the abuser in this situation.
No, and that's what's so frustrating. It's some of the other things I didn't like about Dr. Hughes's testimony was whenever talking about the abuser, she had no problem putting a name on Johnny and putting aggression and things like on Johnny, and speaking about things about Johnny's demeanor or why he would have done things, when she had absolutely no interview with Johnny. She didn't consult with any of Johnny's therapists or doctors. She didn't have those notes. Well, she chose to speak on that. And I found that contrary to her statements about she was only going by the records that she had. She said that several times, and I made a note of it. I even circled it. She's only going by the records that she's looking into, which would be the medical notes from the doctors and the nurses, all the prior therapists, interviews with Amber, interviews with Amber's family, whatever she could find. They were all other people's things, right? Not hers, if I understand. And then the testing that she did, which that's a whole nother thing we're going to talk about next. but when it came to Johnny, she spoke freely about it with nothing. And to me, I made like a big point of that. I'm like, well, where's all of that? If you said you can only be comfortable speaking about it because you have all this in front of you, and that in your profession, you do take this picture, you're allowed to take this, because it's forensic. That means after we can just take all this information, put our own view on it, look at it, and put our own interpretation and opinion on it. This is what we see, which is what she did. Well, she had nothing to go by, but Johnny, just Amber's words. And that's uncharacteristic. That's bias, and she wasn't willing to admit to it being pushed, which, I don't blame her, but it just was a bad look for me as a professional. I just thought.
Yeah. Well, I think, the testing, just going on to testing, because I think just Dr. Hughes shouldn't have made that statement, shouldn't have made the claim that, in her opinion, Johnny Depp was the perpetrator and Amber was the victim. She shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
How she should have phrased it is, Amber reported these situations and this abuse, and the testing I did correlated or matched up with what I'd expect to see from somebody who has been abused in that way. That's how she should have phrased it, because that's exactly what her role was, but the testing thing, I think that the cross was so I got frustrated because we were on stream together, weren't we, and your view on the cross was that it was quite weak, and I actually think it started quite strong in that they were asking the right questions, and then they went to the tests, the CAPS 5 particularly, and we're just making a big deal about how she'd filled it out wrong, and I just think that that's not very. They should have started with that, and ended with the questions around how she's not witnessed any of the abuse. She can't factually know that any of it happened, and that would have been a stronger ending. But because they ended on these forms that were filled out slightly wrong, and as a forensic psychologist, she should have been aware that would have probably come under scrutiny. But really, it's not that big a deal. Like, I wouldn't have seen it if I was a jury member. As a psychologist, I'm like, that's not a big deal. She scored it. She just didn't score in the place that was designated on the form. Like, that's fine, whatever.
Now, when they're taking those tests, can I just ask you, is that her filling it in from the information she's reading about Amber, like, the information she's getting from Amber, or is Amber actually taking, filling out a test herself, and then she's filling out that part with her?
That would have been an interview. The CAPS 5 would have been an interview. So
it's an interview, one-on-one with Amber, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That I was unclear of because of how she kept saying she went to the information, and I'm just like, I wanted to make sure.
So that's why, that bit about the IPV by Johnny, that bit wasn't filled out. She said that the reason for that was because she was aware of the situations, having read the information and having had conversations with Amber in the past. And to me, that's a pretty that would be a legitimate reason not to fill out that section in a therapeutic situation, because you're treating that person, so you are aware of it, and that's for your benefit to be able to make a diagnosis. But in terms of a forensic situation, you want your forms and everything to be up to scratch, so that if they get pulled for something that I have to do documentation all the time, and I have to make sure my documentation is spot on, so that if it does, it's because they're all legal documents, they can get pulled into court. If somebody died or something, they pulled some of my notes or something, they were there, they were present, and they were filled out correctly. And if I don't do that, then that's me. So she should know better, especially with the rate that she's being paid to be able to fill out a form correctly. But that's not really a massive deal. and I don't think the jury will see it as a massive deal, and so they shouldn't have ended
Right.
on that. It was a bit silly of them to do it that way around.
Right. And you know, and when you're talking about the documentation and what another psychologist drew, I mean, it's hard to use very strong language, as I'll remind everyone. We all have very, very strong opinions about it. Well, I really don't think we should attack anybody else about theirs, if you get what I mean. Like we're talking about her professionalism, you know, her profession. Well, like every psychologist is going to do it different, right, Luke? I mean, will we agree on that? But there are certain professional standards and certain things that in reporting of testing and all that you'd like to see unified, you know, so that, you know, an expert is an expert, you know, and that we're all talking about it and not skewing it in any way. But when I look at the testing, I really don't know why she went so far out of her way to attack Dr. Curry's use of her test. And do you have any idea why they're trying to discredit that test so strongly? Besides the fact that it nailed Amber's personalities. I mean, just the fact that she used that particular test. Like, I'm confused where that's coming from.
Yeah, I guess so what you're always going to get, you know, second opinions. They're going to be different, and interpretation of standardized testings can be different as well. So Dr. Hughes would have looked at Dr. Curry's tests and probably thought, you know, they weren't interpreted in the way that she would have interpreted them. And really, you know, if you have a particularly strong, which it's clear Dr. Hughes has a really strong opinion, you will find ways to discredit those results, especially because, you know, a point of pride from your view. You don't want to be kind of wrong. So it's very much about kind of like saying, you know, well, she didn't score it the way I would have scored it. I feel like I'm correct in this situation, and therefore, you know, the test is invalid, essentially. Which is probably how Dr. Curry is going to respond as well. You know, we're going to see a similar behavior from Dr. Curry as well.
Yeah.
But I guess I've seen more professionalism from Dr. Curry, so therefore I'm tending towards her view as being a more objective one than Dr. Hughes currently.
And it seemed like the test that she did was very, very thorough, and I kind of felt even more that way after Dr. Hughes rattled off all the different little ones that she did, all these little, like she made a lot of these little assessment things that you do that are kind of small from when I looked into them, made them sound much bigger than they were when she rattled that whole list down of all the things that she did, as if she had done much thorough a job. And I'm saying, well, is it because they, you know, the results were weaker? You just had to keep, you know, piling it on. Like, I don't know. It kind of, to me, did the opposite. You know, I don't know how others felt about it, but for me, it wasn't as impressive. I wanted something thorough and drilled down, you know. And the PTSD, she said she had prior knowledge from what she had read to believe she had PTSD before she even did the evaluation. Do you remember that statement from her in the testimony?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's difficult because that's not necessarily uncommon. Sometimes people do tests to reinforce a hypothesis, you know, so they might think someone has something and then they'll do another test to reinforce that. That's not necessarily uncommon. My concern with that whole situation was that she'd also considered that Amber Heard had PTSD prior to the marriage with Johnny, you know, but prior to meeting Johnny at all from her childhood, and then highlighted the IPV by Johnny as the primary kind of cause of the PTSD, which doesn't make any sense because what you'd expect in that CAPS 5 is that there would be two things then that would be causing the PTSD: the abuse in her childhood and then the abuse by Johnny. But she only indicated that the etiology of the PTSD So the cause of the PTSD was by Johnny Depp. And that's just not, if she had PTSD prior, then what it would be is the etiology is a childhood trauma, which is exacerbated by the IPV by Johnny. So that just tells me as well that there's bias in her perspective on what the PTSD was caused by, and that she marked it as the primary cause or the etiological cause. So yeah.
I just want to just make. I think that you do not agree with Dr. Hughes's testimony, do you?
No, not at all.
No, I didn't think so. Well, because we're trying to be considered, some people, as you said before, they have very strong feelings. And so as soon as you even take any step towards the other side, all of a sudden we're lumped in with everybody else that's going on, like on Twitter and everywhere. So I just want to be clear. We don't agree with Dr. Hughes's testimony, although we can speak actually carefully and logically about some of the things she said that made sense, okay, and how she gets her information and why she looked at things a certain way. That's the purpose of the conversation.
It's
so
important to remember. Sorry, it's really important to remember that Dr. Hughes is extremely well considered in terms of not necessarily like in the psychological world. I didn't know who she was before this, but in terms of her qualifications and experience, I'm sure she's done a lot of good work, therapeutic work with individuals who have suffered from interpartner violence. I'm sure she's done a lot of good work for other people as well in many different ways. Her performance in this case was subpar and a little bit shocking, actually, in terms of how I would expect a psychologist to act and stay within the remit of a psychologist. But that doesn't mean that necessarily she's bad in all areas. I'm pretty sure she was quite thorough. She was very thorough in her investigation. I just think it was biased, and I think it was biased from probably the amount of IPV she's seen and the sympathy that she has for people with domestic violence backgrounds, which is if you spend your entire career helping people who have come from dangerous situations where potentially there was even people that have been killed and trying to advocate for them, you're going to be biased towards those people. So I don't think her intentions were malicious. I just don't think she was professional, and I don't think she was accurate in her assessment.
No, I agree. John makes an interesting comment, and this is what I do believe that the defense is trying to do. When two qualified people get on the stand and say completely opposing things, as a layperson, I wouldn't believe either, to be honest. And here's the truth of the matter in a legal case: every person on that jury is a layperson. They're not psychologists. They're not experts. They're not able to drill this that way. And so, it can get dicey. She, like you said, she had a lot of credentials. She did. But so does Dr. Curry. And I think that Dr. Curry's presentation in regards to Amber as a person and why she may be presenting things the way that she is also was very damaging to the defense. And they had to come out with the best thing that they can. And what it was statistics about abuse. Basically, that is what, when I look at Dr. Hughes' testimony, that's what I see. It was a testimony about the statistics.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was like, everything that she's saying matches up with the statistics. Everything that she's saying matches up to what I normally see. Okay. Everything that I'm hearing, I've heard before in my practice with all these other women that have gone through this. That's what she's saying. But what I didn't hear her say is that I actually looked at why and how and everything Amber's saying it. I didn't hear her analyze Amber. Did you?
Just around the PTSD, that's the only thing. And even that wasn't clear, as I said earlier, because she defined the etiology as Johnny when she also said that there was previous PTSD from her childhood. So that's problematic. That's just a problem because you can't say that the etiology is Johnny if there's previous PTSD from something else, because it could just be exacerbated PTSD from that situation.
No, and that's it, and that's confusing for me too, because Can we talk about, are you comfortable talking about PTSD and some of Amber's behaviors in the courtroom?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a layperson, and I did not see her react in a way that someone with PTSD would to any, especially even when Johnny gave his testimony, and then when other people were talking about things that happened. I didn't see her reacting in the way of somebody who had PTSD, but I'm not an expert. It just was different than what I would think.
Yeah, I mean, so when you post-traumatic stress disorder, I think, is probably one of the most misunderstood. Well, not maybe misunderstood, but I think people like the concept of it, and people go through trauma and have post-traumatic stress for sure. But post-traumatic stress disorder is like, it's like what we were saying about personalities. It's an extra layer to that. It causes disorder within someone's life. You know, when they so there was a gentleman that I used to where I used to live when I was quite young. He was like in the war. He's quite old, and these kids used to play like they would bully him essentially by playing sirens on their phone, to like the war sirens in the UK. So there'd be this loud blaring sound in the bus,
right?
And he would duck for cover and start like kind of crying essentially, because he was, and rationally he would know there was no there's no sirens and stuff, and that it was kids playing a prank on him. But because of the post-traumatic stress, he had an automatic response to that stressor, that thing that caused him distress, right? Now, what you'd expect to see in somebody with post-traumatic stress disorder in like a courtroom situation like this is a similar automatic response. You know, it wouldn't just be crying at remembering certain situations, because we all do that when we remember traumatic events, and that doesn't necessarily mean we have post-traumatic stress. You'd see an automatic response of like, you know, kind of like very kind of like protective actions, or you'd see some sort of kind of like disinhibited automatic response to the stimulus that caused you the trauma. You'd find it really hard to talk about it, very hard. And I think that it's very interesting to me that, you know, she's been diagnosed with PTSD, and she can talk fairly competently, even when she is crying, about the very specific details, in quite explicit detail, about the, you know, the traumatic events that apparently caused her PTSD. And that to me doesn't line up with what I know about PTSD. You know, especially when you're seeing images and the length of time that she's doing that for. You know, she's doing it for very long periods of time. She's talking for very long periods of time. In other cases I've seen, and in discussions I've had with people with PTSD, you have to ask a lot of questions. You have to say yes, or you have to give them yes/no questions, because that's the only response they can give. And there has to be a lot of breaks. And I just, you know, she was able to just discuss it quite openly and eloquently with a lot of detail. So it is very kind of like, it's a bit confusing to me that would be a diagnosis, regardless of if regardless of if the trauma actually occurred or not, if that makes sense. Because either the trauma occurred and she didn't get PTSD from it, or the trauma didn't occur and she's feigning it, essentially. Does that make sense?
It does. But yeah, I don't, I mean, she's an actress, right? So I guess I can actually look at it that way, that perhaps some of her skills were coming in, but a lot of what I saw even before she testified in the courtroom was playing to the system, you know, because of her quick reactions and quick changes to things from day to day, her demeanor, you know, things that she would do. That whole thing with Copy and how Johnny dresses to intimidate him really used to get to me from a day-to-day basis. But sometimes she would look at the witnesses, like with Isaac, you could see that there was a friendship there at one time. She almost demurely smiled at him in the beginning of the testimony until he said how he felt. And then you could see the flash in her eyes, the change, the stoic look on her face. And she just she went cold. And I think that's a normal reaction to someone who you thought highly of you, but then hear that they think that you're lying and manipulating a whole situation out loud in court. I would imagine anybody would have a reaction to that. But the quickness of it for her is something that I noticed, how fast that changed and what it went. And I think that's something that both you and Dr. Curry had spoke on. I mean, I know you and I talked about it, the changing of her demeanor, how quick it goes, back and forth. And then Dr. Curry mentioned it quite a bit as part of histrionics, and exaggeration being part of histrionics, and the borderline personality disorder more with the changing, the quickness, right? Do I have that right, or do I have it reversed? I think it was borderline. It was more the quickness of the change.
Yeah. So borderline personality disorder, you tend to see quite quick changes in affect. Affect being someone's emotional presentation, and then in histrionic, it's about self-image. So it's about how they're presenting themselves to other people and gaining kind of validation through that. So both of those together, you'd get kind of like, if somebody wanted to gain validation through sympathy, for instance, then they would want to appear in a state of which would draw sympathy, essentially. So both of them together would create that, essentially, that quickness, but also that kind of like image based validation.
I'm sorry. I just I had to answer a text real quick, and I apologize. No, my phone was blowing up like it must have been important. But what is important, though, is that during the trial, when Amber actually did take the stand, and during the testimony, I found myself listening to a lot of it, and there was a lot on Twitter. I think we all saw. Let's just get this out in the open right away. There was a lot on there that people were quoting, that she made certain quotes to movies and stuff like that. Yes, there was some. Some of it's been debunked and some of it's not. So it's got to be taken with a grain of salt. We got to go through the transcripts and pull the actual words. But there was a lot of alluding into exact quotes. She did allude greatly to the Mr. Ripley quote in the beginning about being in the light with Johnny, and then when it wasn't, it was cold and she turned away. But when they're saying it was like a word for word quote, it may not have been exactly word for word. I got to go through the transcript to freeze it. I remember a good part of it being in there, the whole alluding to it, of the being in the light and then being cold, being left out in the cold. Like when you were good with him, you were good, and when you weren't, you weren't. And that is the Ripley quote, basically. So they're right, but they're wrong. But that's what I mean by take it with a grain of salt. Some of it's been debunked and some of it isn't, because, like I said, everybody is like so wanting to prove what a mockery she's making of anything, because there are a lot of survivors out there right now who I talk to on a regular basis, and that I see on Twitter, part of my Twitter following, that are really offended, extremely offended at the exaggerations that she's using in a lot of the testimony, and leaving out the big details and making some nonsensical statements, and just, just making a mockery. And this is the only thing I think, just kind of making a mockery of it in a way, of the whole thing. You and I talked about this. I'm going to let you speak a little bit about the differences in what you've seen in actual abuse victims and their testimonies and their retellings of stories, and into what we saw with Amber.
Yeah, so I guess a big part of a big difference is, one, that she could speak for so long on it without there being a need for her to stop. She was talking for very long periods of time. In very kind of like detailed. One of the things I spotted, which was very unusual, and I usually liken it to people who are trying to be deceptive, but just a public service announcement. I don't think that like body language stuff especially micro expressions, should be used as indicators for deception, because there's no scientific literature on it that shows that it's accurate. It's not admissible in court for a reason. Similarly to criminal profiling isn't admissible because there's lots of errors that you can make with body language interpretation, but there are things that you can kind of like spot that don't kind of match up to what you hear normally, and they're normally actually quite big things rather than micro expressions and stuff. And one of the things I noticed was she always points out bizarre situations. Like there was one when she was talking about the plane, for instance. She was like, Johnny, we have our normal seats on the plane, and I remember this situation really well because it was really weird because Johnny sat in a different seat, and I thought that was odd. And she does this multiple times. She talks about how it was really unusual that this happened, or it was really unusual that happened. And to me, that says that she's trying to insert these kind of like, oh, I found that weird, that's why I remember this detail, in order to make her statement seem more valid, in order to make it seem more believable. Because why would that, we do remember weird details for things, but she's overplaying it too much. Something I found really weird was when she was talking about how much tea Johnny drank, and she was like, it's a lot of tea, a lot of tea. And I thought it was going to come to something, like she was going to make it tack it onto something later on, and she didn't. And I just found it confusing.
What could that possibly add to the story? Like why? Like those are the kind of exaggerated details we're speaking on, like that just make it
yeah. So
make you tilt your head.
Yeah. The other thing, I mean, is this is something that is genuinely been shown in research and stuff, is that when people are trying to fake cry, and this is actually something that we're not taught, but we're like, if it's something that you find out through practice, is if somebody's trying to fake cry, they don't have any tears. And time and time again, when she was crying, there was no tears. There's a great case. I sent you the link to it, didn't I, Claire? I think it's worth people watching it. I think the Christy Mack, John Copenhaver case.
Yes, John Copenhaver, right?
Yeah.
That he was a fighter, right? And
he was a UFC fighter.
Yeah.
There's a video on it on JPS Crime, I think, which is a great channel, but it is very, be careful going and watching it because it is quite explicit. There's a lot of photographs of quite explicit injuries, and the testimony is absolutely
right. I'll link it, but please be careful, people. I will be putting it in the description because we're going to be talking about it. I've given you the link. Her testimony starts at about 35
minutes in.
About 35 minutes in.
But
it does cover the whole case. Yes. There are some graphic photographs of injuries, and the testimony is very graphic, and that's why we were comparing it. Because would you admit that when Amber speaks about a certain event was quite as graphic, especially Australia? And I think Kyle's Goldfish had a question about how we felt about her testimony about this particular incident, which compares, I think, the strongest to what we saw on this other video.
So there's two things that are worth comparing between these cases, and obviously everyone's different, so it's worth taking note of that as you watch it, that people are different. But one of the key differences for me is the way that the testimony is delivered, because you see in Amber will cry, and then she'll start talking again afterwards, and her voice will be completely like, you could clip that and you wouldn't have known she'd just been crying. There's no element of fear in her voice. There's no wobble to it. There's no, when we get bunged up when we're crying, there's no nasal kind of like aspect to it. And when you see Christy Mack testifying about the assaults that happened to her, she doesn't want to be talking about. She just doesn't want to be talking about it. She's there. She's forced to. You can see the tears streaming down her face, and it's like ruined her makeup. Like you can see the tear line over her foundation, and her voice is very wobbly in between the points where she's crying and the points where she's not crying. It's not like she goes from crying to kind of regular again and then crying again. That's like, obviously she's choked up still. And I think for me that's a real like difference in that. That's what I'd expect. That's my experience of working, you know, people who have come onto the mental health unit who have come from
Right.
the domestic violence situations and are having kind of like have had a psychological breakdown and are needing help from us. And then, you know, we discuss that kind of trauma with them, or they discuss it with us. You know, that voice and that presentation is very much what we see, and it's not what we're seeing with Amber. We're just not seeing it there. She seems very open to talking about this stuff.
In not having dealt with a lot of testimonies with abuse necessarily, but actually reading testimonies on people that are actually trying to convince me of something in their testimony. I do a lot of true crime, so I deal with psychopaths and serial killers, things like that, murderers, you know, stuff. And when I'm looking at their testimonies, the one thing that, and I don't mean that like Amber's not a killer, like I'm not trying to say that, okay? All right, let's just be clear. Disclaimer, bare disclaimer right there. What I am going to say is that I would find that I'm pretty exposed to people trying to convince me of something through their testimony. And that I find her exaggerations and concentration on little details that do not matter to the story to be in a manipulation tactic that is used very commonly to try to make the story bigger, better, and more relatable to the average person. So you naturally think you're going to believe it because she remembers all these little details, but she can't remember the big facts, but she remembers all of these little details. Now, I understand during trauma that you can focus on smaller things rather than bigger things because of the level of pain and acceptance and things like that. That would be true, I think. Well, not to this extent of what I'm seeing. Like you said about the tea, there's so many more statements like that in everything when she recounts these instances that and with the calmness and the surety, the caging of words.
There was something that really threw me actually, and it was the first part of the testimony that she was talking about, and she was definitely rhetorically talking about Johnny Depp as if he was a creepy pervert who fancied her because
are you talking about how when they met on the first film in 2011
on the Run Diary, and she was presenting him as a groomer. Now that isn't I mean, I guess years on someone can retrospectively look at that and go, oh, maybe I was groomed in that situation. But the way that she was talking about it at the time, she was saying at the time I felt a bit creeped out by him because he was twice my age. He could have been my dad. Those kind of things. She was saying those kind of things, and to me it was just rhetoric. It was just rhetoric, and I think that
I think if you're looking for
intention, if you're looking for intention, that's where it is, because you know at the time she probably wouldn't have felt those ways. She wouldn't have felt, you know, if she'd said, oh, at the time, I saw this man, he was great, you know, he was really nice to me, blah, blah, blah. That would have had way more stock in it. And then if she said later on, I felt like this was a bit creepy, actually, because I've matured since then. And since then, I realized how vulnerable I was at that time or whatever, you know, that would have had a lot more power. But she was saying it as if she had been groomed. And that's just not how people talk about themselves being groomed. It just doesn't.
And it's not how she talked about that meeting in the past. I can assure you there is, you know, she's in the industry. Her talking about Johnny Depp and how they met is everywhere. Okay. There are clips where she says in that testimony, she says, I really hadn't seen any of his movies at the time. I really wasn't really familiar where he was. And yet during that movie, she did a press release that said, I've seen every one of Johnny Depp's. I'm such a huge fan. When I grew up, I had pictures of Johnny Depp on my wall. I had posters of Johnny Depp on my wall. Like, there's actual videotape of interviews that she did from that time. And if you guys need to see them, they're all over my Twitter because everybody sends them to me and I retweet them. If you just go down my Twitter, you're going to find them. Literally side by side, the testimonies together. It is startling. You know, the difference. It's like a rewrite of history. And I don't understand the part of her disorder that actually makes her think that you can just rewrite history and no one's going to notice. No one's gonna notice.
Well, yeah. So I guess what she's probably doing, like, and you got to remember, she's not crazy. You know, she's
No, she's
got
not.
all her
Yeah.
faculties, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she is testifying to a new audience, to jury. She doesn't care about, well, she should care about public perception, but she's very much kind of testifying to the jury. She wants this to be a win for her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess, you know, the jury wouldn't necessarily have that information. They don't have access to anything
Right.
that's not already given to her.
And this goes to the win at all costs part of the disorder that once you're on the other side of her graces that Dr. Curry had spoke of, um, which is kind of scary because, you know, you would think that you would care after what's going to happen after the trial. Like, all this is going to be out there after the trial. It's all going to be public knowledge. Maybe the jury hasn't heard all this stuff, but the rest of the world knows what's going on, and she's going to have to, you know, function in the world and want a career.
It might be short-sightedness on her part, or you know, the tactics that she's thought about in terms of winning. Maybe she feels that if she wins the case, then she's won the public perception, and that's her view. You know, it might be a irrational view or not accurate, but that might be how she's perceived it.
Yeah. I mean, there's just so much, but also in regards, like, if we go back to that Australia incident, which was her most traumatic part of her testimony, do you feel any part of that testimony that she gave matches up to any of the audio that we previously heard in regards to it?
I mean, it didn't seem to. When I was listening to the audio, I was thinking, is this the same situation? I had to kind of remind myself that it was, because you know, like, she's described how she calmly walked down the stairs, noticed where the blood ran out on the walls, noticed that you know, he'd started with paint, then went downstairs and noticed he'd lopped the end of his finger off or whatever, and decided to go make him a coffee, and said, you like, because she thought it would be better. And then there's the audio, which is, she's very kind of like heightened. She's got a lot of she's seemingly kind of like going into lots of different rooms and being quite erratic in that way. She's apologizing. She's thinking that Johnny will hate her. You know, it's very much, you know, it seems, like it doesn't add up.
Yeah, it doesn't. I can't put myself in her shoes to think that I would be acting like that if what had happened just happened. Like, I can't. I know everyone's different, and it is really hard to come up with how somebody would be in a situation like that if it had occurred. But I cannot see what we actually hear as the audio of things that actually did happen, that we have actual evidence of, as if we are a fly on the wall, so to speak.
And the way she testifies as well in all of these situations is she I don't know, she talks about it as if she's a passive observer. So she'll say, I walked into this room and all of this stuff was covered in writing. I walked into this room and it was all covered in writing. The only point at which she references herself as an actor, not like in the sense of like a profession, but like as within the situation, is when someone is interacting with her, usually in a negative way. So she'll talk about how, you know, like when Johnny's being carried by someone or something like that, she watched it, she's observing it from afar, she's not interacting in any way, you know. And when her dad and Johnny went to get drugs, she was observing it. She saw them go and get drugs and saw them come back, and she from everything we've seen, she's not passive. She's not a passive person. She would have been interacting, which is very.
She would have been talking about it. She would have been putting her opinion whether they should do it or not, or interfering in some way, or, you know, joining in. It's always as if she's not a part of the situation. Not once during any of her retelling of any of the situations did I hear her tell, you know, that she also was drinking or that she also was doing things. And you know, Almost as if she's like
mm,
almost always not, if nothing is ever her fault, like nothing is ever due to her or her fault or her responsibilities at all. Even when she's trying to tell you that, yes, I did react badly, I hit, I did this, I did, it's always with, but because they did this, or it's
yeah,
the reason is like this, they made me. It's almost like she's saying they made me do it. Like they should know I would do it, and it's their fault if I actually do it, because they should know I'm gonna go there.
yeah,
And we heard that in the audios with Johnny. Like, when you walk away, you make me like this. Like when you walk, that's kind of, those aren't the words I'm paraphrasing here, but she's kind of like pushing him a lot to say, like, when you won't stay and talk to me about the situation, you won't get into these fights with me, you make it worse, then I get angry, and I'm gonna be angry, I'm gonna be violent, I'm gonna be keep at you about it, because I want the fight. Like, if you don't give me the fight, then the
yeah,
wanting of the fight just gets worse, and it's gonna get more and more at you. And but there doesn't seem to be any grace there in this relationship for him, to be able to use his tools that he developed from a young age, from what we heard in testimony. He's been not, running away from confrontations like this since he was a child. He saw his first love relationship deal with it the same way. If you go back to the first testimony of his sister, and she spoke of the father and the mother's relationship, and it really spoke to Amber and Johnny. Johnny being the passive father, trying to, do whatever the wife wants to keep the wife from being overly anxious, overly aggressive, and just going off
yeah,
on a tangent, so to speak. Those are the words. Those are some of the words they kind of used. And that went on and on and on until the father just had enough and left. But this is what he learned, is that you just appease them, you just walk away, you don't engage, you don't get into the fight, just do whatever they say and walk away. And so
yeah,
this is some of the tools he was learning, that had to have a great effect on him.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the points at which we, hear him shouting and stuff, I think, everyone has a limit in that sense, and people
Mm-hmm.
react, and I think is also like many of the situations, like I think I heard that the video where he's kicking the cabinets and stuff was just after he had been told the news about his tax being filed wrong, and
Yeah,
he was going to
he
lose six hundred and
not
fifty
only
million.
that, he lost like a lot of millions of dollars, and was actually uh I think they said something about defrauded a little bit by the actual people he trusted. Like, it was bigger than that. Not only did they
Yeah,
do the forms wrong, but something also happened with some of the money, and he had a lot to deal with. And his mom is sick at this time.
yeah,
There's a lot going on.
and that kind of makes
Uh,
sense, like because I found that video confusing initially because he's talking about something, and then Amber saying we didn't fight this morning, and I was like, why are you saying that? It didn't add up for me that
mhm.
it didn't seem to be that he was talking about a fight or anything. He didn't mention anything about her. He came in and he was just frustrated, and he was like slamming cabinets, and then she was like, we didn't fight this morning, and
Yeah, it
that was
wasn't
very
about
confusing
her.
to me.
She
Yeah.
was. It was like she was videotaping it, trying to make it like it was about her. Well, here's another point. I wanted to ask you, if she has PTSD with all of that violent, could admit that what we saw, and I hope the chat will agree, Johnny was in an agitated state. Okay, he was abusing the kitchen. Okay, we get that. He was beating up cabinets and stuff. He was very volatile at that position, but he wasn't like towards her about it. But my question is, Luke, why was she so calm in videotaping it and actually just, trying to control and ask some questions, kind of egging him on a little bit? If she has PTSD, to me, that spoke loudly of like that doesn't sit right with me. If you are traumatized with all of these situations that keep happening, why, when it starts to happen like that, are you just being this way in front of
Mm,
it? You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah. I mean, there is some things that are kind of, again, you wouldn't expect to see, such as her kind of getting closer to him. You wouldn't expect to see her following him after he's just binned
mhm.
the camera. and you certainly wouldn't expect to see. I mean, for me, if we take all of Amber's testimony into account, that the small things that she alleged happened, that caused him to get angry and become violent towards her.
Yeah,
Filming him
because
in an angry state would have been one of those things. So that would have been where we should have seen some abuse, And instead he bends the
exactly.
camera and he walks off, and then
He
she follows
does.
him and then laughs, which
And
is
then
definitely not what we see in that kind of.
Right. She laughed, and not only that, his testimony states that she should continue to follow him from room to room, no matter where he went to get away from her, just bugging her, egging him on. Because there was testimony that we've just heard from the day and a half of her on the stand of plenty of prior events that the psychologist is using to determine PTSD. All of these events prior that caused her to be in a fearful situation with him, turning on a dime or whatever. What was it? How much worse was it supposed to get before she kind of reacted that she might be in some kind of concerned danger, if all these prior acts to that date had happened as she states they did in her testimony? That's what's getting me now, because the more she talks about the prior acts and everything, the more these reactions that we have actual video on and audio don't make any sense to me at all. If all that happened before, her behavior afterwards is just not adding up to me in any way at all. It actually makes it look more and more staged to me. She was giggling, when she left with the phone, and she literally did not feel any danger, or didn't perceive to feel any danger while he was doing what he was doing with the cabinets and being, talking aggressively and stuff and going to pour the wine. And she didn't seem, her demeanor didn't look as if she felt like she was in any danger at all.
Yeah, I agree.
And I hope that they focus on that a little when they come back and talk to her about that with their cross,
They will. They definitely will.
So Luke, what else have you noticed that you'd like to talk about? I know I go off on tangents and I kind of steer it in all different directions. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to have you say.
Yeah. I mean, there's just lots. There's lots of almost overly expressive behavior. She's very expressive. That's not necessarily like a tell, if you want to call it that. But there are some inappropriate expressions, I suppose. I think one of the one of the ones that really tickled me actually was when she was. I've only seen the clip of it. I didn't actually see it in the testimony, but she said about her dog stepping on a bee.
Oh yeah.
And then she had like this really big expression afterwards, and it was like that. It's not proportionate to what you're talking about. And there's been situations like that where the expression is disproportionate to the discussion. So she'll be talking about something, like there was an email that came through or something, and she became very kind of upset at the email. And previously to that, she had been talking about kind of quite hurt, like being punched in the face in quite a calm way, and it was just very kind of like her emotions get seemingly triggered at unusual points.
I get that. Could it be like, what I thought when she said that, when I saw her do that? I know you've been telling me about these inappropriate expressions that she has and to look for them. It's almost like, to me, when I saw it before we talked, when she did it and she made that face, and I was like, she just thinks she's clever for what she just said. Like, she's just really amused at how she got these stories to sound so good. I mean, literally, because the bee, it made no sense to the story to me to even have the bee in there. And I didn't understand it. And I just thought
I don't know how a dog steps on a bee anyway.
I think it's possible because I think it might be, but I just don't see the way it matters into the story. And then the look on her face just made me say, she actually thinks she's clever for getting this in here, and I have no idea what it means. Like, I just like it just blowed me. oh gosh, there was something else about the inappropriate facial expressions and the thing
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that she's talking about, all of the exaggerated detail that she's adding, that we know that that's part of the disorder that Dr. Curry had talked about and that you had explained to us in the prior video that we did. We went over that a lot. Also, I don't want to go into great detail about that, except for the fact that, do you actually think that she's adding all of this in and everything because she actually thinks she's winning right now? Like, is there something in her disorder that would make her just slightly realistic enough to think that she's making great headways here?
It's hard to tell because, you know, we have to take into consideration that she fired her PR team and rehired new ones. So that would tell me that she thinks that there's something up, that she's obviously not doing too well, because you wouldn't fire it. But again, it's that not taking responsibility. It's not my fault. It's not my fault that the PR. It's not my fault that people are finding me unlikable and aren't being persuaded by the evidence so far and the stories that have been said so far. It's the PR team. The PR team aren't doing well enough, right? So that's that lack of responsibility taking again, you know. Because really, you know, PR shouldn't be her concern in this situation. It would be to a certain extent, but you know, she's got to be thinking about the case, you know. So why is she firing a PR team and then hiring a new one? And then the other part of it is that she might be even more exaggerated than she is normally because she's aware that things aren't going well for her. So she might be, you know, changing her story because I've seen a few things where she's changed her story, and I've looked at her depositions from previous cases and stuff, and her story does change bit by bit every time. There's added details, there's added information, there's things that are slightly that weren't too important before that are now being emphasized. There's, you know, added kind of levels of aggression, etc. So she could be changing her story in order to kind of adapt to the negative publicity that she's receiving. So she might actually be doing it more so than she would have done it before in order to kind of like counteract, because she thinks she's losing.
I think so, and I think that's where some of these additional details on stories are coming from. Because if you go back to the divorce and when she did file the temporary restraining order, she had to give detail onto what the incident that happened was. They don't match. There's a lot of extra stuff going on. There's things that would have got to a pretty serious TRO right away that she's speaking about now that she could have got immediately. If she had told that story that way. Things are just getting added in, retold in a different way. It's almost like, you know, you just cross the ocean and you get to just change, you know, everything that happened. You get a rewrite. Like I was joking about that yesterday.
Yeah, these details she's adding in, though, they're going to damage her case completely, though. Like especially around the title of the op-ed in the Washington Post. She may not have written it, but their entire reason for motion for dismissal was about, and the jury don't hear the motion for dismissal, and it does happen in every case. So it's like, of course they're going to do it. So but the motion for dismissal about that specific part of it, the headline was around the fact that she wasn't kind of alluding to sexual violence, and they were trying to say, you know, even if we can't prove physical violence at this point, and even if we can't prove sexual violence at this point, there is evidence for psychological violence. And so it's clear to say that the title of the op-ed, because there hasn't been any evidence around the sexual violence at this point, clearly wasn't written by her, and therefore we should dismiss that part of the case. And it didn't work. And now their first and second witnesses, you know, Dr. Hughes and Amber, have been focusing heavily on the sexual violence.
Mm-hmm. They are, because and I've got legal opinion on that. We'll go through, not as a lawyer, but just as a layperson, just based on proving the defamation case on that we'll go on more at the end. I'd like to go over a couple of questions, some interesting questions people have here that you could help me with, because I'll admit that after Amber's testimony, I'm having a lot of difficulty putting that all in the boxes I need to look at it clearly. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, to actually critically look at every little part. And I'm still on it. And I haven't got to my final conclusion, which is why I may seem like I'm all over the place. But I'm not pro Amber, so nobody spread that rumor out there. Okay, not. Okay, but John wants to say, how likely is it that a guy described as a loving, caring person by all his ex-partners suddenly goes 180? Has that been discussed? I'm sure it has. We did touch on that briefly before.
Yeah. I don't think we've discussed it in detail. So this is a really interesting question, actually, because so in forensic psychology, so you can do all the tests you want, basically. You can do as many tests as you like to see if somebody's going to be do some offending behavior or is likely to do offending behavior. But the biggest predictor of offending behavior is that offending behavior previously. If you don't have that previous offending behavior, then it's very difficult to ascertain whether there's going to be future offending behavior, even if they have the personality characteristics, etc. So it is a big thing in forensic psychology that if somebody hasn't done an offense prior, that it's unlikely that they will do any future offenses. But obviously there's a first time for everything. And what I would say is that relationship dynamics play a big role in domestic violence. And so you could get an individual who has no prior domestic violence in their history, who gets into a relationship and the dynamics change and their kind of life, the factors in their life, such as losing $650 million, such as losing a parent. These stresses could happen, and then you could get a situation where somebody who previously hasn't been abusive becomes abusive. What I would say is that the statistics weigh in favor of somebody being abusive in many relationships as opposed to a single one, especially at his age.
Right, because that sounds more situational than right? Because of the level of toxicity in their relationship, I would say that they weren't well matched. They're like a tornado as far as the way they deal with things. Him running away, her being like that. The way they deal with conflict. Let's say that, just in a conflict situation. I don't want to, get into their personal life in general, but just what we've been presented as how they deal with conflict is like oil and water. Like they should, that's a mess, and I could see things blowing up, but I don't really see him ever getting to that point. It just seems his natural tools to deal with that type of situation are to back off and run away, not get into the situation that he knows, not to get into that situation. And I'm thinking legally, that is why the defense is harping on the drugs and the alcohol. I finally figured out why they're just nagging at that. They're trying to prove that although Johnny's personality states that he would never be aggressive towards Amber, that with it all happening so much in this toxic relationship, that since he was inebriated and therefore altered, he might act outside of his normal pattern.
Yeah, and alcohol and drug use is a massive predictor in IPV as well.
Right. Yeah. So that's what I think they're trying to prove, is that, well, yeah, he's a really nice guy and nobody would ever believe it. But given this situation, they're trying to emphasize like that part of it, which is clever legally. Now I'm looking at it that way, because it confused me for a while why they were harping on the fact that he drank. I was like, so what? He drinks. He doesn't act out while he's drinking. We see him all the time drinking, and he seems to be fine. He seems to be dealing with everything. But then you have to add it to the behind the scenes situation on what's going on with Amber and how Amber was at him all the time like that.
Yeah.
That could be an issue. And that might be what the defense saw as an opportunity. I'm not, That's the only thing that makes any sense to me anyway. Aaron had a good question to you too. You ready for another one? Or do you want to talk more on that?
No. I think we've answered that one. As long as John thinks we've answered that one.
As long as John thinks we did, we're good. But you could bring it up again if there's another part. Surely I'll try to get the question up. Aaron said, is she straight up lying or rationalizing herself into believing it? And this would only be an opinion based on what Dr. Curry said her disorders are. Because, like, how would we know, right? Except for just based on, the opinion that's out there about what her disorders might be. Would that be lying or rational?
This would be speculation, as you just said,
right? Right. Oh, it's speculation.
So.
We don't know.
I don't think she would be believing if she's lying. I don't think she would be rationalizing herself into believing that these situations happen. She knows, like, people with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder, they're able to rationalize quite well, and they're able to recollect events and what happened. They might have a skew on it or a spin on it, but they're able to say what happened beat by beat. So for me, I think, if she's adding in details that aren't true, then she's aware of those details and she's aware of what she's adding, and she's aware of why she's adding them. So for me, I don't think she would be.
Because I had asked you before, does this mean that she's compromised in any way? And we, both disorders, you do know right from wrong. There's no skew there on reality to where you don't know what's going on, like right from wrong. You're paranoid, maybe. Your perception on, things being done against you might be a little different, right? Your perception on how severe things might be.
And who's responsible for it as well? Because, when she's taking responsibility, it's not because she's trying to alleviate herself of responsibility. It's a case of feeling as though you're not responsible for the actions. I did this because you did this. You're responsible. And that's not a lie from her perspective. It's it would be a perception. It would be her perspective of it is the only reason I committed this behavior is because you did this and I was antagonized or something like that. So, and that's a big part of work with people with borderline personality disorders, helping them to take responsibility for things.
No, and absolutely, because like a lot of these things that she worries about, like they normally happen towards an end of a relationship anyway, with abandonment issues and this, that, and the other thing. But we talked before about her behaviors actually leading towards the things she fears the most, actually putting these things into motion with her perception that they're happening all the time anyway, that she actually is causing them to happen. It's a vicious cycle. And, if I feel anything towards Amber, it's that some of this is out of her control because she hasn't recognized it yet. And I don't feel sorry for her that like she's a victim of her disorder, because she's not. Because anybody that's ever heard me talk before is that I totally understand that things happen to people. Horrible things happen to people that don't deserve it. But what we do with it afterwards, how we conduct ourselves and how we treat other people because of it, it's on us. Okay, we have to take responsibility for that.
Yeah.
I do understand that hurt people. That doesn't mean I have to accept it. I'm never going to accept that it's okay for them to do that. I do believe strongly that we are always in control of how we're going to. We can't control what happens to us or the world around us. We have no control over that, but we have total control of ourselves, how we function through it, regardless of the things that happen. It's how we deal with it, whether we recognize our triggers, even the fact that understanding we can't handle certain situations or we need help, or we something bad has happened and we need to address it. Like all of that, it's all in some degree all on us. It's all about us and how we take control of it. So I'll give her no pass for what she's doing when I speak that I can understand it's frustrating to have the conditions that she has. I'll give her no pass for it. I do wish she'd wake up and take care of herself and do something about it, because she's doing damage to the people around her in her life. And I clearly see it in all of her relationships surrounding her. I see the damage.
Yeah. And there's there's a really interesting thing to bring up here, actually, which links to this, and that's there's this kind of historical argument about women and female offenders, well, just women in general, and that's about when they commit offenses, or if they do something that's inappropriate, are they mad or are they bad? So when you think about men, so if we think about a man with antisocial personality disorder, which is like kind of low levels of empathy, low levels of affect, so they don't really tend to exhibit much emotion. They don't really care about other people. They're willing to manipulate people to get what they want, stuff like that. So antisocial personality disorder is akin to borderline personality disorder, and it's about kind of validation and stuff. But typically, you see more men with antisocial personality disorder because it's about internalizing it all. So you kind of like lose your affect and stuff like that. And then borderline personality disorder is about externalizing that stuff. So trying to seek validation from external sources and stuff like that. So a man with antisocial personality disorder commits an offense. Are they mad or are they bad? They're bad, right? Regardless of their personality disorder.
I would say
they're sent to jail. They're responsible. Now, a woman commits an offense with antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, whatever. Are they mad or are they bad? Well, the focus is much more put on the disorder that they have, and they're seen as mad. And that's something that needs to be thought about when we're thinking about this kind of thing, because the faculties are the same. Her level of understanding, her level of responsibility taking is the same as a man with the same or a similar disorder. Yet the standards that we apply are different because of this historical kind of concept that women don't commit offenses.
And it happens so commonly, and so even with people that clearly are not even looking to do it. Because actually, Luke, while you were just explaining that disorder that is more common in men and it's akin to borderline personality disorder, I was thinking, as you were describing all that, most of us would just call that guy a bastard.
Yeah,
and just say that's just somebody I don't want to date, and not actually akin to, there might be something there that they have that is making them that way, like we would a woman, and give the woman the free pass, but the guy, he just a bastard, like the hell with him. I'm just like, it's exactly what I thought. I said, you're just describing like a few people I know, and I never even equated them to having a disorder.
Yeah, and you see the same thing in cases of like infanticide, or in even just like murdering of partners and stuff like that. There's a lot of weight put on the psychological state of the woman in that situation, and I think that it's a double standard because we don't apply the same level of scrutiny to men's psychological state. If a man performs an offense or commits an offense, you don't tend to hear about their psychological state unless they're like severely like psychologically disturbed, like they have serious schizophrenia or something akin to that. So it's really a double standard that we need to kind of get rid of.
Oh, there's just so much. There's so many really good questions in here. I'm like, but Intrigue had a very good one. If we wanted to comment on what the main media and social media have been saying about this case in general, like what you've been seeing, and if you have any comments on some of it, like the mainstream media and that stuff, if you have any comments on that in particular, while I look for some other more psychological based ones for you.
I mean, you would like. The mainstream media does tend to seem to be in Amber's court, and social media tends to be in Johnny's court. And I think that the reason for that is social media has less stake in money. And what you're seeing is mainstream media will not want to describe somebody who has been describe themselves as a victim as like a malingerer or a liar, because they obviously would feel like that could do some damage to their income streams, which is I'm not a fan of capitalism for that reason, because it leads to that kind of like spin.
It does.
People make people will be writing articles with a spin, even if it's not quite accurate, in order to maintain their stream of income.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, and I can appreciate I have just a slightly different view, only from a few things that I saw just recently that really astounded me. I agree. Social media, as far as, let's talk like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, all of that, like all of it, the Twitter, the TikTok, all of it seems very pro Johnny. And there's a very, it's very, very pro Johnny that way. The sentiment is very like, you're hijacking the whole Me Too movement and it's unfair what you're doing to him and we're not having it. Like, they're just not having it. There's groups of domestic survivors out there that are just going against her. There's a lot. Okay, but that's on the social media side. On the main media side, I see it more organized, and that has a lot to do with where you put your effort for public relations, okay? And more on don't blame the victim. How dare you speak out against the victim? That just means society's in the toilet. I actually saw that headline and it killed me because I'm like, how dare you? How dare you tell me that I don't care about society because I think this woman is not telling the truth? Rude. That's why I'm so conflicted. This is what society was trying to push on us. This is what the media is trying to push on us. How dare we ask for evidence? And it's a trial. We have to ask for evidence. It's a legal trial. Okay.
There's a way of coming out of that spin, Claire, and that's
save me.
That's thinking, well, Johnny has also alleged abuse against him, and therefore we would be not believing a victim if we were to therefore say that Johnny is not telling the truth as well. And we can't stay in the middle of that because, well, I'm not saying it's either one or the other because it could be, it could be mutual abuse like has been claimed previously. But at the end of the day, there's someone who is more likely to be more of a perpetrator than the other and instigate more fights. And at the moment, the evidence is lining up towards.
Right. And I think that the mainstream media is starting to see that too. Those articles really offended me. There was quite a few of them. But I also recently saw the Daily Mail and the Independent both come out with headlines that were pro Johnny. Now,
well, that's the Daily Mail, though. Don't.
No, wait. I'm getting there. The Independent. Okay. Well,
the Independent's not that great either.
Okay. All right. Well, the Daily Mail is a gossip one, which I think would have been under the PR of the other side very well, because they had been for the whole 2 years, which is why I'm only saying. And then here in America, we have a channel called Fox News that's very right? Well, they came out with a pro Johnny. And then we're like, come on, Amber, are you serious? Like, yeah, they came out with are you actually serious, Amber? Really? Like, yes. And I was like, if Fox News is saying it, maybe pay attention, mainstream media, the tide's turning. You really want to look at it. You don't want to be going, because we're going to call you out for the sensationalism. I know you really don't care what us little people think. I know that. But you are going to get called out for it, that you're only going for where the sensationalism is, where you think the biggest money is and where you think the biggest market is. Well, when we do look at you, main media, I still, as naive as I am, look to you for the truth and the little kernel of the truth. I can't even say the truth. A kernel of the truth as to what's really going on. So please look at the whole big picture, and give us a break, because I can't believe that one side would be so slanted, in one direction. I would like to see the facts. I want to see some evidence, and if there is evidence, then they will be presenting it, but we haven't seen it as of yet. I'd like to also mention that big story about the James Corden and the makeup artist. Amber clearly stated in that testimony, my makeup artist was there. She saw the bruises. We had a discussion on how to cover it and how to do all of this. The declaration from Samantha, who was there, who was the makeup artist, says absolutely not.
Oh,
she says it's not true.
Wow. Is she a witness as well? I'm guessing not.
She was on Johnny's witness list, but she didn't come forward. There was a declaration.
She might still get called in the redirect.
Well, you can make declarations and depositions to the court and not have them in the actual trial. Like, you can make all of these declarations, depositions, and interviews to the court. So we'll see. We'll see if it comes up. She mentioned it, which means she mentioned it during her testimony, which it means it can come up with cross. So we'll see. Yeah. I'm interested to see if they go for it, because I've actually seen that in black and white. And And I'm wondering, why certain things weren't presented. We don't know the whole picture. Something could have happened. Um, At this point, I think I need to just talk a little legal, as boring as that gets, guys. I just need to go over the defamation part a little bit with you, because here's the risk. The reason that sometimes I think that there's some credibility in what's going on the defense side, and I use that term credibility loosely. It doesn't mean I give credence and, all to what they're doing. What it means is that I see kind of where they're going at and how they can throw this case in their direction for a win. Because defamation, you have to prove that she made the statement knowing it wasn't true, or that the statement, whether she knows it or not, was absolutely not true at all, and that it damaged him in a way financially, because they're both public figures. Okay, because he's a public figure, more has to be proven on defamation as far as losses and all. I think they soundly proved the losses part. The plaintiff soundly, would you agree? I mean, they soundly proved that from what I saw with everything they brought up at the end.
Yeah.
The problem is, I'm not sure where it goes if there's no evidence to prove that any of the assaults happened. Okay. I'm not sure where it goes if Amber still believed it did and therefore spoke on it, which therefore makes it not defamation if she thinks it personally happened to her. So,
well,
there's a couple of lawyers out there saying that the testimony about the PTSD and the histrionic personality disorder and the borderline personality disorder will be in Amber's favor that way. And that concerns me. Because
they've brought in the mad part now rather than the bad part. Right.
Mm-hmm.
People don't necessarily know about borderline personality disorder. They'll make assumptions that she has a disorder, therefore she might not be in the right mind. So I agree with that. But I guess the other point of that though is, I think Dr. Curry's testimony on as a description of what borderline personality disorder was very good. So hopefully that will help the jury with that aspect of it. And the other part of that is, the jury have to be convinced that she believed all of this stuff happened to her. And if they get an inkling that she's lied in any of the situations, then that could really come and destroy her case really in that sense, because some of the stuff that she's describing is pretty extreme. And for her to believe that happened without it actually happening is very loose, even for somebody who has quite severe mental illness. It'd have to be something along the lines of schizophrenia or some kind of psychosis for it to be that extreme. If it's just like, I felt abused because of the way Johnny was talking to me verbally, or I felt abused because of the way he would grab me and stuff like that, that's different. But she's talking about some quite horrific situations, which
and of course, having a personality disorder is not the same as the legal laws that protect you when you have a mental disorder. Legally there is a definite divide there and a definite distinction, because there is no protections on these personality disorders for her and her testimony.
That's a really interesting point, I guess, because there's a debate in psychology anyway about whether personality disorders should be defined as mental disorders, because they're kind of intrinsically linked to who we are in a lot of ways, and they're very difficult to treat, and you can't treat them in the same way that you treat other mental disorders such as schizophrenia.
Exactly. And I was aware, we've talked about that, so I was aware of that. But legally, right now in the climate, right, for this trial, there's a big difference. And she has no protections. Like, if she's proved to be lying about any of this, it doesn't protect her because she had those disorders.
Yeah.
Okay. She doesn't get to pull if there was a mental illness that kind of, could have made me see it differently. Legally. I'm just speaking legally with the way the laws are right now. I mean, I know, we would want, because they are part of us, like you said, they are how we develop, and that it should be that way, but it's not. It's currently not the climate that we're dealing with between how you guys use and identify and not label, but diagnose and treat, you got to do it differently, even because we're separating the two, right? It's all about, how they classify everything. And then legally, the laws that go with it and how you can present it in court obviously has to follow suit. So until it changes, I guess, for on the expert end with the psychologist, they're not going to change it legally in the courts either. So there's no precedent for it. And I'd hate this case to be the one. I really would. Can you imagine? Can you imagine this case being the precedent case for whether or not the law should change on allowing a defense for a personality disorder interfering with my testimony, so I can't be called a perjurer? It's interesting.
I mean, the only problem I see there is that Amber Heard, during the Australia situation, she was on a medication. I can't remember what it's called in America. Seroquel? Something like that. Seroquel?
Seroquel? Okay.
Yeah, which is quetiapine in the UK.
Here in America, that is a drug that's often used in mental health. It's a calming, like a stabilizer.
So it's got kind of dual uses. So one of it is an antipsychotic. Another part of it is a mood stabilizer, and it's quite commonly used with people with borderline personality disorder to help them stabilize their moods a little bit more. But I mean, if they want to spin it in that direction, that if they see that the whole thing is crumbling and they want to spin it, then I guess they could use that as, this is how severe her mental illness was at the time. Therefore, she couldn't remember things accurately, and maybe did remember it in that way because it is an antipsychotic. But that's not the spin they've taken so far. The spin they've taken so far is that everything that happened to her actually happened to her, and therefore it's true, and therefore there's no reason it would actually be a detriment for her to have any kind of mental illness other than post-traumatic stress.
Right, exactly. Because they want the post-traumatic stress to be the lead, because that would mean that more towards that everything actually happened, which would mean if there's any part of the op-ed that's true, it's not defamation, case closed. There's nowhere else to go, because remember, it's not about whether she abused Johnny Depp. That evidence we have seen. I would sit here and say, in my opinion, Johnny Depp has been abused, and he's a survivor of an abusive situation, and he has gotten himself out of a toxic relationship where he was abused. I've seen the evidence for that. I could say that. I've seen enough evidence of pictures of him with actual marks on him. I've seen physical evidence of things that have happened to him in the way he acts, even, and his own words. But his words are backed up by medical documentation. His words are backed up by other witnesses who saw things, who will collaborate it. I have yet to hear anyone collaborate Amber's story. And there were people that were around all the time. I mean, she had personal assistants. She had friends. Her own best friend is not testifying. I heard that she was pulling. Yeah, I'm still going back and forth. Every day I hear a rumor. She's not testifying. She is. She's not. She is. She did. There came out a story about how she was violently attacked by Amber at one point when they were talking about this disorder that she has. That came out in the interviews. And so I'm wondering if she actually is, because, that whole penthouse situation has been disproven already by the police officers in the court, that all the damage that all of these people that lived in those penthouses, that would be Rocky and Josh, and that would be her sister Whitney and Amber herself, who all gave testimony in the UK trial and even possibly submitted it in detail here under their depositions and stuff, gave testimony that all that damage happened before those officers got there, that Johnny did it. Why wouldn't they see it?
Yeah, actually, that kind of is a segue into something else that I'm finding it hard to consolidate if Amber's case is true. Okay. So on the premise that Amber's case is true, so I'm not saying it is true, but on that premise, she had a lot of people around her. She still had lots of friends that she was interacting with on a regular basis
Mm-hmm.
and going out with.
Yes.
She could contact people
Mm-hmm.
quite easily. She spoke about
Mm-hmm.
how immediately after she got her nose broken by Johnny that she took a photo of it and sent it to a friend. And it is very rare in intimate partner violence that would be allowed by the perpetrator. So what you tend to see is isolation. You tend to see somebody
Mm-hmm.
being isolated because the perpetrator doesn't want other people to see the marks on that person either, because
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to be outed.
Right.
Yet Johnny was putting people up in his penthouses free of charge, allowing them to drive his cars, allowing
Mm-hmm.
Amber to go out and hang out with them, and seeing her family, seeing her friends. And for me, that just, again, it's just something else that just doesn't add up, because it's not what you'd expect. And individual cases are individual cases. You will get ones where that's not the
Mm-hmm.
case, but it's
Right.
just that there's so many of these kind of like things that you would typically see in an abusive relationship that aren't present, that
Mm-hmm.
you do see in terms of Amber's behavior. The mocking of his friends, the mocking of other people, the isolation,
Right.
what's it called, like the alienation of his sister. All of that
Right.
stuff is typically
Mm-hmm.
what you'd see in an abusive relationship, not the other way around. And to
Right.
me,
Right.
that speaks
Amber was,
volumes.
it
Yeah,
did. Amber is definitely guilty of that. Both house managers attested to the fact that Johnny's demeanor had to change a little while into the relationship. As she was bringing her more and more to the house, she kept him away from even the staff. His normal interactions with the staff, where he used to have meals with them, he was very relaxed. It was all just him and her, and like everything changed, so to speak. He kind of pulled him back from everyone, from his sister. You're correct. Even the relationship with his children, like there's a lot. When Johnny was around her, he had to be with her, only her. A person so obsessed that she tells me, you know, when you're sleeping, you're not with me, and then takes pictures of him sleeping all the time, everywhere, because he's falling asleep in chairs and and all these other places. Now, whether that's from exhaustion, from being on set, or from having a little bit of wine and relaxing, or whatever, it didn't make any sense to just have all of these pictures of him sleeping in all of these
yeah.
places. It's almost like she would throw it up in his face and say, see, I was with you and you spent like 4 hours sleeping instead of talking with me. Like, to me,
And then
that's what it was like used
yeah,
for prior to the evidence in the chat.
yeah.
Prior to the evidence in this court case, I could see the type of woman she was behaving like. I could see her doing that to him on a regular basis, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And then
Yeah.
you also have like her saying that she was very limited in her film roles, and then she
Mm-hmm.
had some of the biggest film roles that she's ever had. She had Danish Girl, which was a massive film. She had
Mm-hmm.
Aquaman, which was a massive film. And it just what she says doesn't add up to what we know, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just a real problem. If
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult, if we assume that she's telling the truth, it's difficult to understand why these things don't add up.
Exactly. Yeah, gosh, there's just so much. In regards to those, I saw a couple of questions about the witness list itself. The witness list is published to the court, and Fairfax County does have a high profile court case place where they actually, everything is open access to everyone to pull that's filed with the court, and the witness lists are there. The problem with it is they don't go in the order of how they're going to present. And at any time, they can decide to present or not present a witness. It's just a possibility that they're going to call that witness to the stand. So they have to actually disclose to each other in advance everybody they plan on bringing up, whether they do it or not. And strategy changes from day to day because of the amount of time that things took. I mean, we have to be honest. Look at all the time that Johnny had on the stand, just Johnny, how many days that was of the
Yeah.
case. And that could be why we didn't see the makeup artist, why we didn't see some others. Then they have to reevaluate. And I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying, just putting it out there, it could have. They've got to change their strategy as they go based on time and based on what the other side has presented and what they need to prove to win the case, where their strategy is.
Yeah.
So I've had bad luck with who's coming up. I've had bad
the
luck
defense is running down the clock as well, aren't they? They've already used more than
so much
what the plaintiffs have used.
In what you would call redundant, ridiculous, trying to get you to say what I want you to say, would you say?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, you'd expect what I'd expect anyway is not equal amounts of time given to each side. When the plaintiffs are giving their people, you'd expect a bit more time given to the plaintiffs. So
you would think, because the burden of proof is always on the plaintiff, right?
Yeah.
And so why wouldn't they get more time? Like, that just makes sense to me. But unfortunately, it's not the way it is. So, but yes, just like, Elaine, how many times did she say something trying to get somebody to say what she wanted? Oh, but Rottenborn, it's a whole art form with him. He'll actually tell you what you're supposed to be saying. He'll tell you.
And even if you disagree with him, he'll just carry on down that line of questioning, regardless of what you said, which is, because the jury's not going to be convinced by that. If you ask questions, they're going to remember the answers,
Well, they're going to remember who said it. Like, he's just trying to get it in the air. I think he does it on purpose to just get it out there, like get it in the air so they heard it. But they're going to know he said it, not the witness. Especially I forget who it was. I think it was Mr. King. The house manager, the London house manager that was in the Bahamas and then in London. And he is very well spoken, and he tried so hard to get him to say certain things. And he's like, that's not what I said. This is what I said. He did the same thing with the sister, trying to get her to say, and she would go, no, that's not what I said. This is what I said, because he was using words, very exaggerated words, to try to make it appear a different way. And if you're not careful, it can your testimony gets manipulated, and he was really at them with it. And it seems to be his style. It might work for him, but I think for me, I'm offended by it. I think it's bad legal manners. I say that all the time. I want the truth out there. Just ask the right questions to get the story out. If you got a point, prove it. All this extra stuff to just get the jury. I know it's part of the process, and it's a great part of the drama, and it's probably why we're all watching, to tell you the truth, because it is entertaining when they act up like that, right? I mean, we enjoy seeing them go back and forth, but I prefer the facts so I can wrap my brain around them.
Yeah, I guess one of the most interesting things was they were really trying to get that security guard, the Scottish one, to say, Johnny Depp was pissing in the corner. And he was like, if I seen Johnny's penis, I think I would have remembered it, right?
That was such a glorious moment.
But then Amber, I don't know why they didn't tell Amber just to remove that part of the story from her testimony at that point, because that's going to really damage her, because that answer was very genuine. That was a very, of course, he would be like, no, why would you say that? It was very genuine. And then Amber's just saying, it just doesn't, it doesn't add up.
The way he answered it made it like it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. Like, really, you're gonna go that's insane to even think that. Like, that's crazy. Like, that just proves this whole thing's ridiculous. The same thing back in Isaac's testimony about the Amica cream over and over again. Did you see her put the Amica cream on? And he's like, when you kissed her, how did you kiss her? Like that. It was like. And Isaac was finally towards the end, he's like, you're going to ask me about the Amica cream again? Like, no. And he's laughing. He's like chuckling to himself. And I'm sure the jury saw that. Okay. Isaac was a well-spoken man. I wish when they came up, the plaintiff just asked him one question. A man of your age, have you been around enough women to know the difference between makeup, overly made up, or light made up? Right. Let's just go down the thing. Okay. Do you think if you're trying to cover something, would you wear light makeup or would you have a heavy hand on the makeup? And you would probably be said a heavy hand if you're trying to cover something. Can you tell the difference between natural looking makeup that looks like none and heavy handed makeup? Because any man, you don't have to know anything about makeup to tell that difference. Am I wrong? I mean, Luke, you're not of Isaac's age. I wouldn't say you have. Well, maybe I don't know.
I have sisters though, so I know.
Okay, so right?
Makeup, yeah. I'd be able to tell if someone was wearing heavy makeup or not easily.
Right.
It's really not hard. I don't understand why people are making out like it's like a really difficult thing to notice if someone's got makeup on or not. It's not. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
easy to do.
Mm-hmm. And not to turn this into a legal stream, because it's not. This is basically a conversation on the psychological end of it in her behaviors. But basically, the testimony of Kate, her personal assistant, that saw her in her natural state, a lot, unpretentious, no makeup, hanging out, and never saw anything. That speaks volumes. So that's what I mean by the
But then
contra evidence out there.
this is the thing she's trying to do as she's speaking. She's trying to respond to everyone's testimony in her testimony. So, for instance, she said about how if Johnny wants to take his own boots off, he can take them off at any time. Like she said that quite flippantly, but it was a very pointed thing she said. She also said around that, she said, I barely ever saw her, and then described her as horrible and said she drank on the job and they had to spend time apart. So she's trying to dismiss other people's testimony within her own testimony directly, in questions that are unrelated to that, so.
Well, but contrary to that, she says she hardly ever saw her. I think the paychecks, the phone calls, and the friend's testimony that had her there would definitely, she can talk of instances being in the presence of Amber at all these different times. It kind of goes against it. But I could see what you're saying. She focused very much on things that were damaging to her personally in the testimony, and she made sure, which I know she needs to do it. That's what you should do. You should, that's what she needs to do, correct? So, hey, good going. You did what you're supposed to do. But it also, to me, leads to a lot of crafting in the script that was read for her testimony. And I say that cheekily, script, because yes, I'm being cheeky about it, because I'm kind of wrapping my mind around it more. And I think I'm becoming more offended rather than reasonable about Amber's testimony. I really do think that it was put out in a way as the best performance that possibly could to get that jury just to believe every word. And I'm hoping that the jury can see some of the coaching and some of the manipulations that I saw in the terminology that she was using, in the scenarios she was setting up, in the extra exaggeration of language, in some of the small details that she was putting in there. And just one thing, common sense. If you had been beaten that bad and assaulted in the way that you were assaulted, I don't understand how some of the pictures of your relationship with Johnny are out there. The very day after the assault that she said happened so brutally to her, so uncaring, so like she was so shocked about it. The very next day, there's a black and white photo of her on a beach with Johnny. He's standing there, fully clothed, right? He's got more clothes on than anything on the beach, Luke. And I'm going to show you these pictures later, because I want to do another stream with you and ask you about Johnny's affect as far as a victim, because he's got like 5 layers of clothes on a beach. He's standing there with a hat. He's standing stiff-armed like a mountain, and she's draped over him, kissing and hugging on him, just draping herself all over, adoring him, kissing him on the cheek, and all this stuff. It is such a juxtaposition for what she said happened that day before that I'm just shocked when I look at it. It looks more like Johnny was the one that went through all of everything Amber said happened than Amber. Yeah. Because I can't, I know that I do realize that there's a different way for everyone to handle things that happen to them. But I cannot wrap my round around that kind of a turnaround in 24 hours to where she could actually leisurely just drape herself over her offender that way.
Yeah. I have 2 minds about this, because I think that, like, as you said, like, it doesn't feel natural for that to be the case. And I think I know the photos you're talking about, and it does.
Yeah, they're like black and white from the Bahamas, right?
Yeah. And it does seem like Johnny's a bit more distant in those photos, but there is something that happens in these relationships, which is quite interesting to note, and wouldn't necessarily be a nail in the coffin in this sense. and that is that, and this kind of relies on all of the other aspects of an abusive relationship to fall in place, like the isolation, like the kind of the love bombing, and the kind of like making that individual reliant on you and you alone. That tends to be what leads to that kind of behavior. But you can have that happen in a domestic abuse situation where people present as if they're, there's no issues in the relationship and stuff. And I think, we go back to the video that I sent you, and you shared about Christy Mack and John Copenhaver.
Right.
You see that to a certain extent as well. You see that there's photos of them together, like kind of a couple of days after an abusive incident, and they are showing that loving. But the problem with this situation is that she wasn't isolated. She wasn't only reliant on Johnny Depp. She can say that he limited her film roles. That's not that doesn't seem true, because she had some of the biggest roles in her life in that period of their relationship.
And she was often on set without him. She traveled without him everywhere. She went with her co-stars to concerts, to shows, to dinners on a regular basis with everyone. Yeah. She socialized with the industry daily without Johnny, tossing his name around a lot from what people say, but still his work for her was behind the scenes, and it was all to benefit her, because even in court, he would not speak about her being a horrible actress or whatever, or using him in that manner. It was almost like it was accepted between the two of them. You're younger, I'm older, I have the experience, you don't. He was helping her. I really believe he was helping her. I really believe she went for the relationship to get that help. And I think to some degree, he understood and accepted that as a 58-year-old man with this much younger of a woman coming up in the industry. How could you not? Nobody's that naive, right? I don't want to believe anybody's that naive. Okay. Love happens, I get it, but it's still part of it. It would still have to be a little part of what's there. Okay. I get that. I mean, I don't think he was that naive. And I think he willingly helped her. He talked about the advice he gave her. She talked about accepting it until it didn't work to her benefit. And then she twisted it. The way she twisted that advice is very offensive. He actually coached her how to not be a TNA actress. And yet she then gives testimony that says he treated me like TNA on the set. I can't wrap my mind around that, because that's not him. No one else says that about him as their. I don't see any other co-star saying anything like that.
Yeah, and she says about how like he contacted people on sets and stuff, and you just expect to, like, the amount of people that she's saying were involved, you would expect there to be a number of people who would be able to testify to that, and power dynamics aside, in the current world we live in with Me Too and stuff, I don't doubt there would be a lot of people who would be willing to testify if that were the case.
Believe me, if they believed he was overreaching and doing that to her, of course they would, especially in that climate. Nobody wanted to get caught in supporting that kind of behavior then. And I'm sure they don't now either.
Yeah.
Look what happened to everybody that had anything to do with any of that, coming out of like 2016, 2017, 2018, Harvey Weinstein, the op-ed, ACLU and the Me Too, and then moving forward from that. No, it is a bone of contention. Like just they said, that's how they proved the financial loss of defamation. It was such a hot ticket that there was no negotiation on whether Johnny did it or not, because he was even thought to have been involved in anything like that at all. He was out. They didn't want to mess with it. They were like, we cannot afford that kind of press. Gone. Just gone. We're not even going to consider it. Like, sorry, not sorry. It doesn't matter who you are. You're out. They weren't.
Yeah.
But they should have did the same to her. But they felt that they would have got. I can understand business-wise that they would have thought they would have got judged harshly because of Me Too if they also canceled her contract. Because reasonable minds, as I'm seeing now on Twitter and other places, when I go to say something, they don't always appreciate the independence of thought, that you want to just stay neutral till you have all the facts. Like it's like you're with me or you're not. I'm like, okay, I'm just not with anyone then, because I want all the facts. And I don't think they would have I think they would have got slammed a lot if they tried to stay neutral. Although I would have preferred that they did and got rid of both contracts or none of the contracts. But that's hindsight,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Boy, you got more in you, Luke?
As much as you need, Claire.
Oh
You've
my
got
gosh.
You've got an appointment now, haven't you?
Oh no, not until no. Now it's not until 6. So
that means nothing to me.
That means nothing to you. That would
11?
be and that's another hour from now.
Oh,
That
okay,
helps
cool.
you. Okay.
Cool.
So I don't have to be anywhere for another hour. So if you have more, or the chat has other questions, I could pull up a few. Let me see.
So there was one that Kyle's Goldfish asked. Just give me a chance to find it because it was a while ago.
Is it a while ago about? I know she's talking about Camille now. I can see. Oh, that's the one we talked about Australia and about whether
it's a new one.
a new one about it, because we did address the one about the audio, right? I did. Yes, Kyle, did I get that for you?
It is also about the audio, but it's about how Jerry Judge and Ben King handled Amber.
Yes. Yeah, so, let's talk about that, because that's third party, right? That's other witnesses involved with it outside of he said, she said. So that's important.
Yeah. So when I listened to that, and I was listening to how they were talking about Amber and how they were handling the situation and Amber's reactions, and even the kind of the doctors, I think it was Dr. Kipper who was in that situation as well.
Yes, he was.
And how he was talking about Amber. That was all very reminiscent to me. And like, so I've just to make the statement again, I've worked with probably hundreds of people who have emotional unstable personality disorder when I worked on an acute mental health ward. And it is very difficult to manage their emotions when they're in a heightened state. It's very difficult to appeal to them. 1 minute they'll be very heightened, and the next minute they'll be calming down, and they'll be seeming to be rationalizing quite well, and then they'll get triggered again, and then within a very short amount of time they'll be heightened again, and then you have to kind of go through that process, and it becomes quite distressing for everyone because it's a really lengthy. It could take like an hour or 2 hours for the situation to resolve itself and for everyone to be calm and stuff like that. And that was exactly what was happening in the situation. It was Amber getting heightened. Amber, 5 minutes later, she was calm and she was talking and she was talking about getting on the plane. Then she'd get heightened again and be like, I don't want Johnny to leave me. Where's Johnny? I need Johnny back. I hope he doesn't hate me. Those kind of things. And then it would be, she's calm again. And I think they handled it quite well, but there's certain things that you could tell that they weren't mental health experts, because in a mental health institution, the best thing to do, and this sounds really cold, but the best thing to do with somebody who is heightened in an emotionally unstable and they have emotionally unstable personality disorder is to essentially ignore them when they're behaving that way, because what you're doing when you're engaging with them when they're in that state of mind is you're validating them at that point. You're validating their emotions. You're validating that heightened thing. And the best thing to do is just talk to them when they're calm, and then withdraw when they're heightened, which does not feel natural. Yeah. Oh my god, it feels so bad. You feel so bad, and sometimes it can escalate it more for a small period of time. So there's more risks. So on the mental health ward, there's risks of self-harm behaviors if that happens. So you have to be vigilant, but withdrawn.
And that kind of goes to her disorder with the histrionic personality disorder, the exaggerations and the borderline overly switching back and forth, and also actually just ignoring it so she doesn't keep pressing it.
Yeah,
it's probably the best thing to do. Don't feed into it. I mean, that, I've learned that through dealing with my grandson. Even when we get to the point where things are just so heightened, you just can't. It needs to be complete stillness, just so they have the opportunity to settle back. So she would need that to switch, right? The less you feed into it, the more opportunity for her, based on her personality disorders, to switch back and calm down a little bit.
Well, yeah, and so with emotional unstable personality disorder, a lot of it is about wanting to feel cared for and feel safe and feel like people are attending to you, right? What people tend to do is attend to people where they are when they are heightened, and not attend to people when they are calm, because they're calm, so you can step away, right? But what that does in somebody with emotionally unstable, that works for everyone else, but with people with emotionally unstable personality disorder, what that does is it validates the heightened behavior and then invalidates the behavior when they're calm, because what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to tend to you and care for you when you're in this heightened state, and I'm going to withdraw and abandon you when you're calm. And so what they learn through experience, this isn't like a conscious learning process, it's unconscious.
Right.
But what they learn is that in order to get that validation, to get that support, to get that cared for feeling, they need to become crying, like start crying. They need to start screaming and disproportionately to the situation. Now,
to get the attention they want.
Yeah,
right.
precisely. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why the opposite works, to actually retrain them to calm down. And that's just to say that unfortunately, these people that were hired around Johnny to do other things weren't expert. Like, they don't know this. That's not where they're going to be coming from. They're just dealing with what they're dealing with, right? In all fairness, they're actually feeding into it without knowing they're feeding into it by trying to calm her down and do all of this, instead of just ignoring her and letting her calm herself down and then giving her the attention, asking her what happened, how does she feel, what's going on. She would have got the attention she was striving for that way, and it would have, turned it around. But I understand that they weren't there for that. They're there to control the situation. And they don't understand. Like, they're not Dr. Curry. They didn't even get the benefit of Dr. Curry's testimony the way we did to hear all of that and to be able to know that that's what's going on with her. They have no idea at this point. So I feel for them. I do, because they're just dealing with that rattling. And the more they try to help her, the worse it gets, the worse she keeps coming with it, because it's feeding it. Like, I could see what you're saying. I could see the tornado that situation was.
And it feels
really feel for
as a
them all.
professional. Yeah, it really does. Like, I can speak for that from a first person perspective, as someone who's experienced it. But that it feels so uncomfortable to leave someone when they're in a really heightened emotional state, because it doesn't feel natural. You want to go and care for them. That's what that behavior is for. Like, in everyone else, it's only when we're truly distressed that we exhibit that. But for people with emotionally unstable personality disorder, it's not only when they're truly distressed, it's also when they're kind of needing some validation from an external source. But Carl's Goldfish also adds a good point that it wasn't possible because of the boss-staff relationship. And I think that that's a really good point to make as well. You can't, if you're employed by someone to protect them, and then you don't attend them when they're in a distressed state, then they're going to fire you, because
and that's what I mean about them all being there for a different reason. The nurse, the doctor, the paid staff, they're all there for a different reason, not to do mental health for Amber, right? So it wasn't their concern. They're just handling the situation the best they can, and they're not. I feel for them, and you could tell by the doctor's note. You remember when the doctor said, "Listen, if it was up to me, you could triple that or double it or whatever the medication," because they were asking, "Can I give her more? She's really upset. Like, we want to calm her down." And they're like, "As far as I'm concerned, you could double that," because it's almost like he was like, "Been there, done that. I was there yesterday and had to deal with this, and she doesn't calm down. Like, give her 3. Just get her to calm down, but without having to deal with her, like, just give her the medication. It's going to bring her back down." To me, I sensed a little bit of frustration in some of Dr. Kipper's notes, but it's only from reading medical notes. I don't want to put anything on him, but it amuses me to think that it's just a personal perspective. It just amuses me to think that he picked up on a little bit of it. Just a few notes to the chat. Totally Clueless, thank you for your compliment. She says she's going to catch up with us all tomorrow. It was good to have an actual conversation about this, not just arguing. Thank you. That's a nice compliment, and thank you very much. We're trying not to piss anybody off with different opinions, but to actually speak about it honestly and with a little bit of clear information about certain situations. And of course, Luke has much more expertise than I or some of us out on Twitter that are bantering this stuff back and forth. So it's nice to get another voice involved that might actually know more about what we're seeing, what's driving us all crazy with her. So I don't know. There's also I want to. Did you notice that our friend Ranty, right? Luke, I mean, you've been over there with us. You were on stream with us. I'm streaming the whole trial over there with Ranty over on Auditing the Absurd. for the trial coverage. He did a 1-minute 42-second video on the judge that is at millions of views. I think it's up over 7 million views right now. And I cannot be more happy for him because he wants to be a full-time YouTuber. He has a personal reason for doing this story in regards to like men also suffer this. And he is very pro Johnny and he's personally connected to it in that way. And I'm just so happy for him that this will be the moment that moves him into the success for his channel, that he not only got to tell his story, but he gets to connect with the trial in a certain way and have it actually work positively for the rest of his days to the end of the trial. I'm so happy for him on that aspect. So shout out to Ranty for all of that, and for giving giving Luke a platform too, and recognizing that there's more to the story, and letting us, all of us, as I see some of you from the chat here are right there from there. You wouldn't even know I exist if it wasn't for Ranty. And I'm so happy that you're here to hear the other sides of these stories and bring it back and bring it to the questions when we go back to trial. Keep being more informed about what's going on and talking in that chat and asking the good questions. It makes it a lot easier for me to cover. I think it makes it easier for Ranty to cover. It makes it much more enjoyable in the chats, just to listen to the testimony and then to be able to talk to you all about it. So thank you all of that, for all of you here. Because I know it's weird to see me up here with Luke for a couple of hours instead of Ranty, because I just spend on, geez, I hope Ranty doesn't think I'm like, running away, because I'm not. But like, I did have a small, tiny little channel over here before, and I do love doing library chats. I like to talk. Y'all know that. Like, that's it. I just like to talk. but I know, right? Every conversation we have, Luke, turns into hours. Like,
yeah, it does.
Hours. Like, it's just, I'm very fascinated by this, and it seems that others are too, because they seem to have stayed and gotten intrigued by the psychological aspect of it as much as we are, especially with the things that are going on with Amber, as Dr. Curry had stated.
I'm going to do a shout out as well, because I know
please.
One of my colleagues is also watching.
Are they? Yes.
Yeah, she's just as qualified as me. I'm not going to out her who she is.
Okay.
But I've been WhatsApping her and just checking that I've been accurate with the stuff that I've been saying, and she said I have been. So that's good news.
That is
to know
good
that
news.
Someone who is a colleague is agreeing with what I've said. So.
Well, I would just say hello, colleague. Thank you for watching. And he's very careful. He's very careful. He is. And he's very good about sharing the information, too. I enjoy everything you send my way as far as articles and the things to look at. So it's nice. It's always nice when someone reaffirms that you're heading the right direction with it. It's good.
Yeah.
But let's see. No, I'm not. Kyle, that's a terrible thing to say. Okay. Arcanic says, I enjoy both bending to my anti-Amber bias and to have a more balanced convo. So between you and Ranty, you've got it covered. Thank you. Because, Ranty and I are both biased. And so is Luke. We admit it. We did not come into it thinking we were in the middle of the road. We were definitely pro Johnny, all three of us. We just try to give you the rest of the information because we don't really want to skew anybody like to the other way without the facts and without like the other side of it. I think it's always important to challenge our views of something with how someone else is looking at it. Not only does it confirm what you believe, but it might just open you up to something else and make sure you're not, narrowing your perspective too much.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with reaffirming how you feel. It makes you solid in your convictions, right? It makes you, it makes you loud like a bear, like me, and soapbox a lot, because I will listen to all sides of it and then be absolutely sure about where I'm coming from for it, how I feel about it anyway.
And I guess just to add to that, Claire, because I know we've spoken about this in private before, but I think both of us weren't necessarily convinced either way when we first started watching the case. We were very much, this is an interesting case. Let's see what happens. In fact, my opinion initially was that it was just a toxic relationship. Both of them were probably abusive towards each other, and
yes,
and it's become this massive thing that it didn't need to be. But now, having seen the evidence, that's where my opinions developed from. And so I'd be wrong if I carried on, if I just kept my opinion as it is now, without also taking into account new evidence such as Amber's testimony and the stuff that she's going to be presenting going forwards, because I can't form an opinion on half a story, but
exactly.
I don't think half a story has been told. I think that actually what the plaintiffs have done a really good job of is presenting exactly what we'd expect to see from Amber's side, and showing it for how weak it is, to be honest, because they brought up a lot of stuff that if there was real kind of evidence there, they wouldn't have wanted to even bring into the attention of the jurors. They wouldn't have wanted. So that tells me a lot that actually, this is more than what I initially thought it was.
And that's true. When I did come into it legally, honestly, I did not think the case, because I know how hard defamation cases are to win. Okay. And I kind of came in it as saying, if there's even a hint that he cursed her out, or that he even just had a smack in the face once, he's going to lose because of bias in the perception of everything out there, and because of societal pressure and how we're going to do. And also the law states if even one instance of this op-ed is true, then no case. Okay, so legally I had big doubt that it was going to be absolutely winnable, and I do go back and forth about whether it is or not. I think the plaintiff's side, those lawyers are amazing. I'm quite impressed with the case that they're presenting. I'm quite impressed with the foundation that they've laid, and how they've proved 2 out of the 3 things. Absolutely. The last one is going to be Amber herself, whether she knew it was false and she did it maliciously. That was number 1, because 2 and 3, as the judge said, there's plenty there for this to go forward. Motion dismissed. Now, Amber herself has kind of proved the malicious part of her intent in 2 things. And this is my opinion. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not even a paralegal. I didn't even take 1 legal class in college, right? But post-college, I've spent every single day reading legal briefs since. I kid you not. I'm that much of a legal nerd about this stuff. When it comes to defamation, and the first point of Amber that the judge had spoke of, that she wouldn't really speak on because of that headline. Number 1, Amber's retweeting of that headline and the article took ownership of it, supported it, and promoted it. That goes towards defamation right there, and intent. She wanted it out there. She promoted it and pushed it. She wanted it out there. She was proud of it. She actively edited it with everyone. Point also being those emails. Now, we heard about those emails, right? In those emails, clearly they were all negotiating to take Johnny's name out of everything. The best that we can, because they knew it was going to be a legal quagmire if they didn't. And Amber, it wasn't that way in the beginning. She was all for it in the beginning to go the way it did. And then because of a NDA that she has based on the divorce settlement, to not speak of certain things, because remember, she had already accused him of abuse with the TRO. He was trying to squash things down. His lawyer recommended an NDA, so Amber could not go forward and talk even more with these accusations that he said are false, and they wanted her to be quiet about it. NDA. She went forward with the op-ed afterwards, which means it could be a violation of that NDA also. Yeah. Even just the retweeting of that title.
To be fair, in that situation, just about the NDA, I don't understand why NDAs can encapsulate unlawful acts. That doesn't make any sense to me.
They can't, actually. There's legal precedent to say that they can't. Actually.
But they're used that way. They are used that way.
They try to use them that way, but when people actually, for an illegal act, fight against them, I do believe they could win based on legal precedents if they do. But that's for a lawyer to talk about, not me. But I see what you're saying about that. It does look like it's because I'm dealing with that with another case with Scientology, with the delay in victims of rape coming forward because they had to go through some teaching thing through Scientology, and they actually inhibited them from going forth. They said they signed an agreement not to go to the police, so therefore they shouldn't, and they shouldn't get an extension of the time, for being able to file charges because of it. But that's where illegal act comes in. Well, that was an illegal act that happened, and you can't actually tell somebody, I can't talk about it. You can't tell somebody did something illegal to me and I can't talk about it. There's precedent there. And for the first time, Scientology lost that battle. I'm happy to say they lost that battle in court.
Good.
On that it was like an NDA. It was a teaching contract, like a contract to be in Scientology. So it was similar to an NDA. That's why I'm saying there's precedent for you to fight it for illegal act. There's plenty more. That's just the most recent one that I know of. But with that NDA in place. But the other thing that they proved was that at the end of those emails, the last emails were very important. The last ones back and forth involved Amber saying, if there's any way you can get that back in there, it makes a better story. Yeah, and I'd like you to do it.
Damning, isn't it?
And that came from Amber. And to me, that proves intent to damage him. Just nails it right there. That's intent to damage his reputation. It's a better story if he's in it. And I don't care what happens to him. Go for it. That's what that said to me. And that proved it right there. So if they can get, number one, all of that, the rest of it out, that she actually, that it's not true, and she knows it, then they've definitely proved their case and they'll win.
Can I change the subject slightly?
You could change it totally if you'd like.
Yeah, well, it will be totally actually, because my colleague has WhatsApped me an interesting question. I'm interested to hear your answer, Claire. So she says, do you think that people would perceive Amber differently and her diagnosis if neither of them were celebrities? Like perhaps people would want to demonize her more because of who she is, or if they were not famous, maybe they would feel differently and have more sympathy towards her. I can tell you what my answer was, because I
you go first. I mean, I'm working on mine. I know what my first one was, but
so I said that they'd probably have more sympathy towards her, and I think that would be because of the fact that there's so much footage and photos of her out in public because she's a celebrity, that there's a really key baseline essentially for how she acts and how she is in the public, and also in terms of the evidence against her accusations, like her having photos the next day with no markings and stuff like that, that it would be much harder for the plaintiffs to mount a decent defense that wouldn't I think Amber's testimony on its own is very kind of would be persuasive if there wasn't this mountain of evidence against her, so all the people that we know are involved in them, all the people they employ, all the people that see them out in public, and all the photos that are taken and videos are taken of her, I think that's what is making it so that people are kind of going against her essentially.
Yep. I would say almost exactly the same, only I would add a little more to it. It's more of, we would not have absolutely the impression of Amber Heard. We wouldn't be able to see the evidence of what she's saying not being true by, I got punched with 2 black eyes on day 1, and on day 2, here I am with this lovely television presentation, and there's not a mark on me.
Yeah.
Don't have a broken nose. I don't have 2 black eyes. I definitely don't have broken ribs. We wouldn't see that. We wouldn't know that if she wasn't in the eye. We also wouldn't have the perception of all of the reputation she has about being a little loose with her cohorts, about all the things that have happened, things that she's done, being a little contrary, other allegations she's made about people that she's worked with. We wouldn't have any of that bad rumor stuff that goes on with her either. So we wouldn't be looking at her as a, not a nice person, you know. So it's not just about the abuse part, but also about the not a nice person. She doesn't really present as somebody I would want as a friend. I don't want to know you, Amber Heard. I don't know you. I don't want to know you, like, at all. You know, that's the impression I get. And we get that because of media and the things that get leaked and stuff like that. The other part is we wouldn't know Johnny Depp's history either, of being a decent person, of all of the movie that he did. How could he have this long of a career if that's how he treated people? You know what I'm saying? Like, we wouldn't have the benefit of the positive stuff that we know about Johnny either, and that his whole reputation. And we wouldn't know that he was drinking and doing drugs and all of this. But I think if we did not have all of that, because this is the way that we have interpreted the statistics for what we see in like media, what we see and what gets reported in the news, on television, on HBO, just on the socials themselves, most people would believe that Amber was a victim. I truly believe that.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's why I say, no, because that's how slanted it is out there. Without all this extra, that's where we would all be if we didn't have the rest of it. And that's why I'm saying, you know, I want to go more for equality. I want to say men too. I want to say abuse has no gender. And I want to push that more, that we got to look more for the facts, because it is true. Most of us would just say, if all we heard was the story, we would think Amber's a victim.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something just being discussed in the chat that I think is actually really important for us to note, Claire, which is essentially that this could be really bad press for people who have a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And
true.
I think what's really important to note, you know, because as I say, guys, I've worked with many people who have had probably in the hundreds people who have borderline personality disorder. They're nice people large amounts of the time. They're lovely people. They're, you know, they're caring. They want what's, you know, they're just like everyone else, except for the fact that they struggle to regulate their emotions. They fear abandonment, and they you know, can get quite heightened in situations and not take responsibility, right? So all of those aspects of somebody, and then if you add them onto somebody who, you know, is quite career driven, is willing to kind of like manipulate people into getting higher up in their career and stuff like that, you know, that's where the personality disorder comes in. Somebody is not their personality disorder, although there is this sense of lacking identity within somebody who has EUPD, so they might just associate themselves with that disorder, and then that's their kind of like identity. But that's not true, even if that's what they believe, you know. People have all these different aspects to them. They you know, they can be loving, they can be kind, they can be all these things, and also have a personality disorder.
Exactly.
You know? So this, I think it's just worth saying that, because, you know, these guys are bringing up a really good point here, that
it is.
They can be kind and they can be nice, and it's not, you know, their personality disorder isn't all of their personality.
True. And I don't think that we've even, I think we've both tried not to present it in a negative light either. Just because Amber has those disorders, she still knows right from wrong and things like that. We're not presenting that those disorders are making her into any kind of a monster.
Yeah.
Okay. If a monster exists in Amber Heard, it's of her making. Let's be clear. Like, I would never associate what is being categorized as what her disorders may be as the creating of that monster that's making her do this. I'm clear on that, because I've asked the question, does she know right from wrong? Yes, she does. Does she know reality? Yes, she does. So we're not painting a bad light on those disorders. They are disorders that may make you act in heightened ways, and that's clear, and that's a fact. And we're not trying to put a stigma on anybody for it at all. You know, if Amber loses this case, I do agree that it might because of the testimony, but I would hope that people would give grace and not give her that excuse, and actually make her be responsible for her behavior and not be saying anything of that nature. I'll be one speaking out against it if I see those articles. I'll tell you that. I'll be saying stuff, because that's not right. You know, I agree with you.
This is what we're trying to do, though, in these conversations, is
exactly
not have this black and white thinking about things, you know. So things are complex, and I think people forget that quite a lot. You know, it's not all or nothing. It's not that somebody's personality is their personality disorder. It's not that if somebody does a woman does something wrong, it's because they're mad. You know, and it's not. You know, I think it's just worth remembering that the world is grey in a lot of ways, and you know, talking about these kind of like more nuanced issues within it, and thinking about, you know, how complex the situation can be, especially in a relationship like Johnny Depp's and Amber Heard's. You know, it's very complex, and to pick that part's very difficult, and just to say, you know, it's absolutely one way or the other initially with in any situation is bad, because you're automatically then just going to allow yourself to be vulnerable to pitfalls in that, and then, you know, you have to either double down or give up on your position essentially. Whereas if you do take into that grey area, if you go into that grey area and you form an opinion based on the evidence that's there, and you separate out these things, then you just get a much better view of what's going on, and it's much clearer. And then you can justify why you're making that decision much better. So, you know, you can say, oh, this person has borderline personality disorder. That meant that they would act in this way, but they also are a bit of a dick as on top of that, which means that it exacerbates the kind of things that you see. So, and that's
you could
a
be
more
both.
nuanced view. Yeah.
You could definitely be both. You could have that disorder and not have it be responsible for you being a shitty person. That's the point.
And one is not an excuse for the other. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we also support, I think most of the chat gets that, and definitely, and it was a very good question, and thank you for bringing it up, and I thank your co-worker for bringing that up also, because that is such a good conversation and such a good part of what we're trying. I think it's like, without knowing it, Luke and I have come from the same place, that's exactly what we're trying to do. The gray area that he's talking about, that is the premise of everything that I'm doing here with Library Chats. Have those conversations. There is no black and white. Okay, there's all gray area, and let's discuss it. It's much more interesting, I can tell you that. It's much more entertaining than arguing, you know, he said, she said, or I believe and you shouldn't. This is much more entertaining for me. It seems to be more entertaining for Luke, and it seems to be more entertaining for you in the chat too. So I hope you join us again, because Luke, your conversation about mad versus bad set a whole series in my head of conversations that I want to have about certain situations. Well, there's so much there. There's like the man-woman dynamic. There's the society dynamic. There's the parent-child situation. Like, there's so much there. There's so much there. I don't know. Yeah. Well, oh boy. Now where do we go? Right? Does anyone else in the chat have anything? But otherwise, we're going to wrap up a little bit. I think.
Any questions, please?
Mm-hmm.
Although you'll probably get talking for another. Well, up until the point where you have to leave.
Yes, I can give you another 20 minutes, people. If you have a question, just at me, either at myself or at Bearded. He's in the chat also. And I'm sorry I haven't been able to get to all of it. I've been concentrating more on the conversation and the questions that I do put up. This is good. I want to address this because this is something we eventually are going to get to on this channel strongly. In the autism community, we say, if you've met one person who's autistic, you've met one person who's autistic. And I would say that same applies to personality disorders. And that is the way to think of it. And you can expand that to a lot of things. And 1000% Arcanics in 1971. Thank you so much for that. Because
this is
that's it.
Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just really excited about that comment because
go on.
I agreed with it strongly in the chat. But you know, I've worked in autism and learning disability services for 3.5 years now. And you know, what's really frustrating is the assumption, and this goes for people with mental illness as well, the assumption that because somebody has a diagnosis and it meets the criteria for a set of symptoms, that must mean that they are the same as everyone else that has those symptoms in some way. And you know, like, everyone is different. You know, if you think about neurotypical people, you know, I could meet a bunch of neurotypical people And even though they're in this neurotypical like camp, you know, technically neurotypicals are the biggest camp, right? Well, that's arguable, actually.
Well, the majority, we'll say.
Yes,
Yeah.
technically the majority, although that's up for debate, I think.
I think
But
so.
you meet people, right? And they're very different. They have different interests. They have different likes. They have different ways of expressing themselves. They are, you know, everyone's individual, and that applies to people with autism. That applies to people with learning disabilities. That applies to people with mental illness as well. So, you know, you've got, and also just because you don't get on with someone doesn't mean they're an asshole. You know,
Right.
personalities clash. You know, so again, it's like, you know,
that statement, not your cup of tea. That's real. Like everybody, there's like a zillion million types of tea out there. It's quite easily for someone not to be your cup of tea, and just
precisely. Yeah. So yeah, I really want to get away from this generalization of people with certain disorders or conditions.
Exactly.
You know,
and I do hope that everybody listening on YouTube, and I know those of you in the chat, you truly understand that there's no stigma here in regards to talking about these things. Talking about them, do not stigmatize them. Actually talking about these things destigmatizes, in my humble opinion, and I think Luke might agree, when you can do it respectfully and openly for everyone to contribute, and then try to not be black and white about it, to try to take everything in, it's not stigmatism. It's the opposite. It is actually putting it out there that it's acceptable to start speaking about it, because the only way to destigmatize these situations is to keep the conversations going loudly, more commonly, make them more commonplace, make it acceptable to talk about it. And I believe that. And I believe it about
as well.
Yeah.
And you know, I think if you want an analogy to try and help you understand it or to help someone else understand it, just ask them if everyone who has a broken leg, if everyone who's ever had a broken leg is the same in their personality traits, because I guarantee you they'll say no, they're not. So why do we apply it to other things?
That's right. They're not the same in how it happened, or how they healed from it, or how they felt about it, or anything about it at all. Not the doctor they saw, not the cast they got, nothing about it is the same. Every person is different about it. And so the same thing with the personality disorder. It's going to be different, you know.
Exactly.
You know what, Jean? I support that sentiment, because I constantly call myself that all the time, and I own it, you know, because I'm always saying something, you know. But Letitia, I did read your comment before about owning what is wrong in a situation and getting help, and that perhaps being a narcissist might keep you from doing that. Luke and I did do another library chat a little while ago about narcissism, about being a narcissist is actually very rare. Narcissistic traits is very, very common. And maybe the traits to not wanting to think there's anything wrong with us would definitely keep us from getting the help that we need. But I don't know if that would necessarily make that person a narcissist.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like you could have that trait that says I'm all that in a bag of chips and there's nothing wrong with me, but that does not make you a narcissist.
And I guess this is a good point to separate what narcissistic and histrionic are, because there's a reason that she wasn't diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. And so the difference is subtle, but it's important. So because you'd see those essentially what we describe as narcissistic traits in Amber Heard, right? So a narcissist feels they're more important than everyone else. They genuinely feel that. They have an inflated sense of ego, and they're willing to step on people to meet their needs, and they want to be the center of attention because they feel important. Now, histrionic is about self-image and how you present to other people, and you get validation through people complimenting you and through commenting on your self-image and being around you and you being the center of attention. So the difference is like a narcissist wouldn't necessarily be like doing the same thing as a histrionic person, where they would change their image to meet other people's expectations, which is what we're seeing with Amber Heard. She keeps changing her image and how she looks, and her clothing, etc., to meet how other people want her to be. With narcissism, they think they're above that, so they would very much be their own person. They think they're so important that they'd just be who they are, and other people will have to accept that kind of thing. and they have to accept who they are. So the difference is that the self-image is very important. The reason that they come across like they're more important to they see themselves as more important is because they're trying to promote a self-image of importance rather than actually believing it. So that's the difference. And I think that that's very important, because I see a lot of people calling Amber narcissistic, and I understand why.
Right.
It's just worth noting that, the histrionic personality disorder is the one that got diagnosed for a reason.
It is one of the reasons that prompted me to actually speak about that publicly and do a library chat about it, because commonly people will call all over social media somebody a narcissist, and I just knew it's almost like a misuse of the term, not on purpose, because it is a narcissistic trait. You're absolutely right. 100% narcissistic traits. We're seeing them everywhere, especially with YouTubers. We're out here talking to you. Like, we got some, there's stuff everywhere, all over social media about narcissistic traits, and you're probably dealing with them every day. You're probably dealing with somebody that has them, somebody at work, somebody in your life, somebody personal, or just seeing it on TV, everywhere. But it doesn't make him a narcissist. And that just annoyed me. Like, it just annoyed me, the difference. And that's just me. I just had to set that straight. Because it was a misuse of the term, and I didn't want the language to change, because I wanted it to be used, like when we call someone a narcissist, I wanted it to mean what it means. You know what I mean? Instead of like to take this generalized definition that everybody was trying to push on it. Because that happens a lot with language.
It does, especially scientific language. And the other one, actually, I want to address, and that's not anyone said this in the chat, but I see a lot of people calling her a psychopath, and I can tell you categorically she's not at all.
Could you tell us why? Because I would like that clarified for people, because I say it and they're like, "No, you're just giving her too much grace." I said, "No, I'm not. Actually, no. The definition." Look,
so a psychopath lacks empathy, which I think people would say that she lacks empathy, but she doesn't. She has friends who I think are genuine friends. She cares a lot about her dogs. She cares a lot about her family. They also are, very kind of like, they have flat affects themselves. They don't tend to feel too much emotion. And I don't see that in her at all. I think she's very emotive, and she the heightened behavior that we see in the audios, that's genuine. That's not put on. It's just that it's inappropriate, and it's not proportionate to the situation, right? So her going into like a rage and stuff, that's less characteristic of a psychopath. A psychopath is more instrumental in their aggression and a bit more like planned out, and they'll have a flat affect. There's some great books on psychopathy if people want to read about it. One of them is Without Conscience, and that's a book by Bob Hare, who is the one who devised the psychopath checklist. Another really good one is the Psychopath Checklist, which is by a guy called John Ronson, who's a journalist who wanted to investigate this, and he also has a TED talk on it. So you can see kind of how she has affect. She does care about people. She's not displayed kind of instrumental aggression per se. It's much more kind of like rage based and kind of like reactionary, not planned out aggression. So for me, it kind of it doesn't add up to
because that's one of the questions. Do psychopaths actually fly into rage like that? Like, that's
they're less likely to. I mean, there's a propensity to, like, they can, but it's just not likely. Like, it's much less likely. They're
more planned out. Let's just face it.
Exactly.
When you think when I think psychopath, I think more bang for your buck. Like, if the one that's going the extreme is to get the best reaction possible for whatever it is they're doing to try to do to you, that's the psychopath. Okay. So the one that made the really long plan that really just boxed you into a corner and just like gave you no way out, that's the psychopath. Not the one flying off the handle just because you said something they didn't like.
Precisely.
It's different.
Yeah. And if you want a good like kind of baseline for how bad you have to be a psychopath, essentially. If you do the psychopath checklist on Hannibal Lecter, so how Hannibal Lecter presents, he is not defined as a psychopath.
He's calm. That man was calm.
He's not defined
precise.
as a psychopath. He doesn't meet the criteria for the checklist. So
He
if you know,
doesn't. Okay,
no,
so you don't have to eat people. All right, that's good. That's good.
no,
No.
and
Okay.
it's because
Yeah.
there's a lot of in psychopathy there's a lot of kind of like
Mm-hmm.
what's the word, like a
Oh,
major
that's
part of it is
interesting.
offending behavior
Mm-hmm.
in adolescence and stuff. So if
Mm-hmm.
somebody is like if somebody is offending in lots of different ways, so they
Mm-hmm.
might steal something, and they might hurt someone, and they might do some like
Mm-hmm.
vandalism, and then they might do some fraud. So they do a lot of different types of offending behavior. That's one of the
Mm-hmm.
major things in a psychopath
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing.
And
So
there was
yeah.
so one more quick question. I don't know if you can handle this quick, but
Okay.
when it comes to both borderline personality and histrionic personality disorder, is there more of a physiological or basis to it, or more of how they were brought up, or some kind of traumatic event?
So trauma isn't necessary for these. There just
For
has to be
either one,
attachment.
right?
No,
Mm-hmm.
no, no. So
Mm-hmm.
the main thing is about attachment.
Mm-hmm.
So attachment is a big issue. So that could be feeling abandoned as a child. It could be
Mm-hmm.
around some minor levels of neglect, but not like, we're not
Mm-hmm.
talking like major neglect. Trauma
Mm-hmm.
can cause childhood trauma can cause personality disorders, but it's not exclusive, which is why Shannon Curry
Mm-hmm.
said no to that question.
Right. And she said no. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's the reason.
Mm-hmm.
So uh,
Family
there is,
history, paper?
sorry,
Family
no,
histories?
no,
No.
it's more
Mm-hmm.
about how you're brought up in the attachment, but
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of, there's no, this is the problem with personality disorders. Their cause is very elusive.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very difficult to ascertain what causes
Mm-hmm.
them properly. There's mainly attachment theories is the one
Mm-hmm.
that's is the thing that's kind of guiding them.
Mm-hmm.
There is some
I
physiological stuff, but it's more about how the personality disorder affects the physiology rather than it being genetic.
That's what I was thinking. I was just saying it's more about how they are relating to what's going on around them while they're developing that creates these disorders. It is how they're interpreting, developing, and how it's affecting them that pushes them that way in some
Yeah,
way. Yes. So not necessarily like there is something there already because it is part of like how they're processing what's going on. But it's not necessarily genetic, you're saying, or physiological, or, not necessarily born that way. Something's
it's not been shown to
helping you.
be yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, so I hope that answered the question for the several of you who asked. It is quite complex because from what I heard that Lucas just said is that yeah, it leans towards being situational and how you were raised and all, but there's not there could be instances where trauma has occurred that it leaned that way also, and that it's not necessarily genetic, but they actually don't have enough research yet to say so. Would that be
Yeah.
fair? Yeah.
Yeah, it is very complex, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there doesn't seem to be too much of a
Mm-hmm.
pattern just yet, but
Mm-hmm.
attachment is the biggest thing that we have at the
Mm-hmm.
moment.
I think
That's for a lot of
yeah,
personality disorders. So that
right.
includes narcissistic personality disorder,
Mm-hmm.
histrionic, borderline,
Mm-hmm.
antisocial, all of those kind of personality disorders. It's very
Mm-hmm.
much uh, dependent personality disorder as well. That one is
Mm-hmm.
around attachment. So
Mm-hmm.
attachment is the biggest kind of like link to all
Right.
of them, really.
Oh, okay. So, Nick, some of the links that you shared with me on articles about personality disorders and all, is it okay to share those in the description for those that want to learn more or go into
Yeah,
greater detail?
yeah, of course. I think,
And if
yeah,
you come up, those books that you mentioned, if you would list them for me, I will put those in the description too for all of
no
you on
problem.
YouTube that are listening, and for those of you in the chat that didn't write it down, for anyone who wants to look at it differently, because we want to share the information, if you want to go farther in it. But
Yeah,
this was quite the conversation, Luke.
as always.
As always, I hope you'll come back again soon. But I think we could end it. I think we could end it here before we get another 20 questions, and I
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
cancel my
fair,
engagement
fair enough.
because I do absolutely love hanging with you all with this, and hope to do it again soon. Hopefully, we could do another one sometime during the week for all the other stuff that's going on, please check my community tab. I don't want to sit here for 10 minutes and try to tell you all the places I'm going to be. I'm just not a very good YouTuber that way.
Can I plug something
But
quickly as well,
I
Claire?
will. I'm going to plug. I'm going to say
nice.
that Luke is doing on Monday psychology, a new stream that you really have to check out on Mondays. Will there be one this Monday, Luke?
No, so it's going to be fortnightly, just because.
Okay, so next Monday, but they will be on Mondays. Yeah. Okay. So
Mondays.
see, I'm told you I'm bad at this YouTube stuff. I can't even plug you. But for myself, I'll be doing legal crime update on Monday. I'm also doing some things tomorrow. Tonight I'll be over on celebrating Mippett's birthday over there on the Shields for a little bit. And I'm going to be doing a murder minion conversation on John Benet. For those of you that are in the Discord, that was moved to 6:00. So we'll see you over there shortly. Other than that, please check the community tab and leave your comments, like the video, share the video, because I think this conversation should get out there more, and just let's our opinions, our discussion about it be extended to those that want to contribute in some way. I'd appreciate it. So just, share, like, all that YouTube stuff. Check out Answers and Reasons, where you'll see Bearded Heretic often. Check out Bearded Heretic's channel. There's a lot of good stuff on there too. And other than that, I'll see you all later. Okay, Luke? Hopefully I'll be seeing you soon too. Okay.
Nice. Yeah.
All right.